Chapter 1646. Inside the ancient heavenly sword tomb, it seemed that it was difficult to feel the passage of time. Tianjianzi closed his eyes and wholeheartedly accepted the inheritance in the crystal stone. Chernzong, on the other hand, separated part of his mind to comprehend what he had gained from this trip. Each of the crystal stone inheritances obtained from more than 100 sword tombs had their own subtleties. What Chernzong wanted to do was to extract the essence, abandon the dregs, and integrate them with himself, constantly strengthen his foundation, and improve everything about himself. Vaguely, Chernzong seemed to be breaking some kind of boundary and making a certain aspect reach a new height. Naturally, Chernzong associated it with the unbreakable sword circle. The continuous use of the unbreakable sword circle and the continuous integration of the mysteries of the 24 dragon snake diagrams, as well as the tempering of the previous battles, had all indirectly improved the unbreakable sword circle. He should use the unbreakable sword circle as the foundation to create a defensive unique skill, one that was close to the extremity. If possible, it would be best if it could be used to defend and counterattack. However, it was not easy to create a unique skill that was close to the extremity. Everything was very quiet. Chernzong slowly comprehended while guarding, while Tianjianzi accepted the inheritance wholeheartedly. 15 minutes, 30 minutes. The inheritance time this time was longer than any of the inheritances that Chernzong had received. 2 hours. After 2 hours, Tianjianzi's inheritance finally ended. Bright light burst out from Tianjianzi's eyes, as if the sword light had pierced through the sky. It was incomparably sharp, incomparably tyrannical, and implied an indescribable power, as if the way of heaven was strict. Chernzong was secretly shocked. This gaze revealed Tianjianzi's strength. He was afraid that Tianjianzi had broken through and was more powerful than before. As for how much more powerful he was, it was hard to say. It could only be seen when Tianjianzi attacked with all his strength. "Congratulations," Chernzong said with a sincere smile. "Many thanks." Tianjianzi's eyes were filled with gratitude. This was really the inheritance of the Sky Sword Path. Moreover, it was a complete inheritance. Not only did it have the first part, there was also the second part. Only then did Tianjianzi realize that the first part of the Heaven's Path that he had cultivated wasn't complete. As such, as soon as he received the legacy, he immediately made a small breakthrough, and his strength increased by 30%. As for the second half, which was even more profound, it would require a lot of time to comprehend and cultivate before he had any hope of mastering it. He would have to wait until he left the ancient heavenly sword tomb. He was grateful to Chernzong from the bottom of his heart. Their initial agreement was that Chernzong would obtain the other inheritances, while he only wanted the inheritance of the Sky Sword sect. That was what he had always done. But what was the inheritance of the crystal? One had to personally come into contact with it and sense its aura to be able to tell. Just now, the crystal of the Sky Sword sect was in Chernzong's hands, so he couldn't sense it. If Chernzong lied to him and said that it wasn't the inheritance of the Sky Sword sect, he could take the inheritance for himself. If he really did that, perhaps he would not be able to find a second inheritance, and his wish would not be fulfilled. However, the other party didn't do so. Instead, he handed it over to him without any hesitation. "Jiandi! Jiandi! Jiandi!" At this point, Tianjianzi admired Chernzong from the bottom of his heart. He didn't believe that Chernzong couldn't see the brilliance of the Sky Sword sect. It was definitely better than the previous 100 inheritances. There was no comparison at all. Respectable. Admirable. "Let's go and get the other inheritances," Tianjianzi said with a smile. This was the condition that he agreed to Chernzong's request. There were still more than 100 other inheritances. Of course, Chernzong wouldn't have any objections. But then, it was Tianjianzi's turn to fight. Sure enough, Tianjianzi's strength was indeed stronger. But from Chernzong's point of view, there was a limit to his strength. He hadn't broken through the limit, and had only risen a little from his original level. However, this might be because he had just received the inheritance of the Sky Sword sect. If he had time to cultivate, he would break through the real limit and advance to a higher level, becoming even stronger. After a series of battles, it was Chen Zong's turn to fight again. Inheritance! 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 Gradually, Chen Zong's concept of the new unique skill became clearer and clearer. The 200th Sword Tomb. The 200th Sword Spirit of the Undead. This Sword Spirit of the Undead emitted an increasingly strong aura. At the same time, it wasn't wearing a robe, but a broken armor. It looked like it had just come out of a battlefield. There was a trace of blood in its grayish-white sword. Not only was it filled with a deathly stillness, it was also filled with a faint smell of blood. Chen Zong's expression was slightly dignified. Just by sensing its aura, Chen Zong knew that this sword spirit of the undead was not to be underestimated. Kill! The undead that had comprehended the laws of the sword did not know what mercy was. He struck out with his sword, but it shot through the air like a bolt of lightning. It was like a bolt of lightning that had pierced through space. It possessed extremely shocking power, destroying everything. Tianjianzi stood hundreds of meters away. Suddenly, he felt his whole body tighten and his hair stand on end. It was as if he couldn't resist the power of this sword even though he was hundreds of meters away. However, Tianjianzi believed that Jiandi could definitely block this sword. Sure enough, as Tianjianzi expected, Chen Zong unsheathed his sword. The pitch-black sword light seemed to streak across the void and collided directly with the sword spirit of the undead. An astonishing momentum burst out, and countless sword chi waves tore in all directions. Fast. Amazingly fast. Whether it was Chen Zong or the sword spirit of the undead, they both displayed a terrifying sword speed. It seemed chaotic, and they didn't use any swordsmanship. They just kept striking out with their swords, but they were extremely fast, as if they were going to surpass the limit of speed. After a while, Chen Zong found that he was actually at a disadvantage. The sword spirit of the undead was not only extremely fast, but the power it contained was also extremely terrifying and destructive. Unbreakable sword circle. In an instant, Chen Zong stood still and launched a defense of the sword circle. This time, Chen Zong intended to use the pressure from the sword spirit of the undead to break the final limit and truly create that move. After all, the concept of self-creation had already reached the extreme, but it still needed an opportunity, or a strong enough external pressure to suppress it. If the sword spirit of the undead wasn't strong enough, it wouldn't be enough for him to achieve a breakthrough. So, would this be a good opponent? Next, it was time to test it. Defense. With a sword in hand, nothing within a 5-foot radius could be broken. The undead swordsman's attack speed was extremely fast. Every one of its sword strikes was like a blood-red bolt of lightning, radiating the power of destruction and silence. Tianjianzi knew that if he were in the undead swordsman's shoes, he would only be able to block a few of the undead swordsman's attacks. However, Chen Zong completely defended against it. Not enough. Still not enough. Is this all you've got? Chen Zong's voice rang out from within the unbreakable sword circle. It spread out like thunder in all directions, and the rolling waves raged between heaven and earth. Tianjianzi was suddenly stunned. Jiandi also had such a violent side. The sword spirit of the undead seemed to understand and was enraged. Its aura skyrocketed by more than 30% in an instant, becoming more and more tyrannical. The edges of its broken armor seeped out traces of bloody lightning, constantly fluctuating, and the aura of destruction became more and more intense. Strike. The speed of this strike was directly increased by more than 50%. It was faster, and the power contained in it was more than 30% stronger. The combined power was more than doubled. This strike was blocked by Chen Zong's sword, and weakened layer by layer. However, Chen Zong also felt an extremely terrible power from it, as if it was going to penetrate all of his defenses. Not enough. If this is all you've got, I can only end you, Chen Zong said again. Tian Jianzi was dumbfounded. This strike was enough to kill him in an instant, but it was blocked. How could Jiandi's strength become so terrible? Sure enough, the world of the peerless genius was incomprehensible. It was too shocking. The sword spirit of the undead seemed to be even more furious. Suddenly, countless bloody thunderbolts burst out from its body, and gathered in the sword in its hand. The originally gray sword was dyed red, and the aura it exuded became more and more terrifying. Kill. The sword broke through the air. It was only a combination of strength and speed, but it burst out with the most terrible power. It was more than twice as powerful as before. In an instant, Chen Zong felt his hair stand on end. He had a feeling that this strike was not something he could block. The unbreakable sword circle would be penetrated and broken under the extremely terrible power of this strike. When the sword arrived, the sword had already disappeared. Only a bloody thunderbolt with destructive power could be seen traversing the void universe, as if it was shattering layers of stars. Creepy. Goosebumps. In an instant, Chen Zong felt as if his soul had exploded. Countless inspirations gushed out in an instant and gathered in an instant. It was as if a circle had evolved in the divine sea. Half of the circle was black and the other half was white. It slowly rotated like a swimming fish, and it exuded a simple, mysterious, and round charm. As if he had been enlightened, the sunken knight's sword was also swung out in an instant. It was just a simple swing, but it exuded an indescribable charm. The sword light seemed to strike down from above, and it directly separated, as if it had cut the void under the sword into two sides. One side was black, and the other side was white. They were clearly separated. Then, the black and white slowly rotated, and their trajectory had an indescribable mystery and charm. Tian Jianzi's eyes widened as he stared at the black and white rotating sword circle. He only felt that the black and white sword circle seemed to have formed a world of its own, and it exuded an indescribable mystery and Taoist charm. In the blink of an eye, Chen Zong had already performed this move when the bloody thunderbolt full of destructive power broke through the air. The moment the bloody thunderbolt hit the black and white sword circle, not only did it fail to break the black and white sword circle, but it was also melted away by the power within it. Such a tyrannical strike, which was enough to threaten Chen Zong's life, was dissolved just like that. The second strike. It erupted again, and the sword struck again, but it was still unable to break through and was melted away. The third strike. The power of the sword principal spirit was greatly consumed, and it was no longer able to release such a tyrannical attack. The black sword circle paused, and then a beam of sword light condensed and broke through the air. The infinite strike. Chapter 1647. In the vast spirit sea, there seemed to be a blood-colored sword light that flashed across the void of the universe like a divine thunder. It was as small as a speck of dust, but it seemed to be able to destroy stars. Blood thunder explosion. This was an auxiliary secret technique, and it was a 10th grade secondary divine ability. After cultivating it and activating it, it would allow one's attacks to be filled with the destructive and destructive energy of blood lightning, causing the might of every single strike to become even more powerful and terrifying, and its lethality to become even more shocking. This blood thunder explosion was the blood-colored power displayed by the sword principal dead spirit just now. It significantly increased the power of each sword attack, and it was indeed very tyrannical. Chen Zong meditated for a while. Although he did not fully comprehend the blood thunder explosion, he basically understood the mystery of it. The realm was divided into beginner, advanced, and perfection. First, one had to condense the blood thunder seed. There was no difference in the power of the realm. The only difference was the number of times it could be used. At beginner level, it could only be activated 3 times at most, which was equivalent to increasing the power of the attack by 3 times. However, at the intermediate level, it could be activated 10 times in a row. At the advanced level, it could be activated more times, up to 100 times. As for perfection, it was endless. As long as the rhythm was mastered, it could be activated continuously. However, if it was an overdraft explosion, which was to detonate the Blood Thunder Seed, it could further increase the power. However, it could only condense the Blood Thunder Seed again, which would be more difficult than the first time it was cultivated. As long as the seed was detonated once, it would be more difficult to condense the next time. Basically, if the number of detonations reached 3, it would be difficult to condense the 4th time. However, some special people could detonate it 4, 5, or even 6 times. It's worth cultivating, Chen Zong thought secretly. Whether it was a normal increase or a seed explosion, this was a very tyrannical auxiliary secret technique. Chen Zong was not in a hurry to act. Instead, he meditated more deeply. Tian Jianzi was not in a hurry. He had already obtained the inheritance of the Sky Sword principle. Next, he just had to fulfill the conditions he promised Chen Zong. It did not matter whether it took longer or shorter. Seeing Chen Zong meditating, Tian Jianzi also slowly comprehended the mystery of the Sky Sword principle. Time passed by slowly. It just so happened that all the materials required to cultivate the blood lightning explosion could be found in Chen Zong's storage ring. Inside Chen Zong's body, at his chi-si, streaks of blood-red lightning suddenly condensed like silk threads and gradually intertwined. This was the power of the blood lightning. It was a secret technique that was formed from one's own strength. First, he had to condense a blood lightning seed before he could step into the blood lightning explosion. More and more blood-red lightning bolts were born and condensed in his chi-si. They intertwined from all directions like countless spirit snakes, and finally condensed into the shape of a round ball. That ball was completely blood-red, and in an instant, it emitted an extremely intense light that wreaked havoc in the entire chi-si. It was as if there was blood-red lightning that was vast and mighty, and it was filled with an extremely shocking power that seemed to be able to destroy everything. The light receded, and a blood-red ball filled with lightning appeared in his chi-si. It was incomparably condensed and contained an astonishing power. Blood Lightning Seed. This was the blood lightning seed condensed by the beginner of the blood lightning explosion. At this point, Chen Zong's blood lightning explosion secret technique had reached the beginner level. The time spent from start to finish was about 4 hours. Chen Zong felt it carefully. This blood lightning seed seemed to be tyrannical, but in fact it felt hollow and weak inside. This was because the power contained in it was not much, and it was only enough for him to use it 3 times in a row. The next cultivation was to continuously condense the blood lightning seed, and to continuously condense and accumulate the power in it until it finally reached the stage of endless growth. Only then would it be complete. That was not only the accumulation of the power inside the blood lightning seed, but also the qualitative change of the blood lightning seed itself. However, the next cultivation required time and energy. Obviously, it was not suitable here. But it was not bad to have 3 chances to increase the power of the attack. It could be used as a trump card. In 4 hours, Tian Jianzi had also comprehended some of the mysteries of the Sky Sword Doctrine. After all, he had studied the first part of the Sky Sword Doctrine for many years, and his foundation was incomparably solid. It seemed that he had obtained the complete inheritance of the Sky Sword Doctrine. With a strong foundation, there would be obvious progress in a short period of time. Until Tian Jianzi's accumulation was exhausted, he would then fall into a state of bitter cultivation. But that was a matter for the future. At this moment there were more than 50 sword tombs left that had not been visited. Chen Zong and Tian Jianzi continued to move. Tian Jianzi could also see that the swordsmanship that Jiandi walked was a combination of the strengths and essences of many schools. It was the most difficult and complicated of all the cultivation paths. Without enough talent and luck, it was impossible to achieve anything. Instead, it would waste a lot of time and energy. Such a path was the strongest swordsmanship when it was put on the path of swordsmanship. Today, Jiandi was walking on such a path. It was just that he was still on the way, and whether he could achieve it in the end was unknown. But Tian Jianzi admired his courage and perseverance. At least, if it were him, he would not have such ability. The further back the sword tombs were, the more ancient they were, and the overall strength of the swordsmanship spirits that appeared in them would be more powerful. Chen Zong waved his sword, and the black sword light split into two sides. As it rotated, it was as if heaven and earth had merged. There was a kind of natural charm, as if it had formed a world of its own. The Yin and Yang Sword Realm. This was the name that Chen Zong had given to this move. The sword was divided into Yin and Yang. Yin and Yang were the two sides of nature, as if they had formed a world of their own. Therefore, it was named the Yin and Yang Sword Realm. It was a pity that it was a little different from what he had originally imagined. The Yin and Yang Sword Realm was a pure defensive move, not a defensive counterattack. However, because it focused on defense, its defensive power was extremely amazing. Once it was used, it was as if the sword had divided the world. The inside and outside of the sword circle seemed to have become different worlds. If the opponent wanted to attack him, it would have to pass through the two worlds. There was no doubt that this defensive power was extremely amazing. Even if the attack power was extremely strong, even stronger than the line of heaven and earth, it could not break the defense of the Yin and Yang Sword Realm and hurt Chen Zong at all. Under the Yin and Yang Sword Realm, no matter how strong the swordsmanship spirit was, it could not threaten Chen Zong at all. Chen Zong knew that unless it was a real expert who was half a step away from the great saint level, it would be impossible for him to do anything to the Yin and Yang Sword Realm. Sword tombs were visited one after another, and the swordsmanship spirits were defeated by Chen Zong one after another, leaving behind the inheritance of crystals. In the end, there were only 9 sword tombs left. The tomb of the 99th generation of Tian Jianzi of the Sky Sword Mountain. This swordsmanship spirit's robe was black. It looked relatively complete, but it was a little old. Its aura was deep and mysterious. Immediately, the swordsmanship spirit slashed out with his sword. The sword light silently tore through the sky at an extremely fast speed. Chen Zong blocked it with his sword. No matter how the spirit attacked, it could not break through. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Chen Zong carefully observed the spirit's swordsmanship, absorbing its mystery and essence for his own use. After several unsuccessful attacks, the swordsmanship spirit seemed to be enraged. An extremely sharp voice suddenly rang out from its mouth. Then, as if it was summoned from the void, a black sword light instantly condensed. The second one. The third one. A total of 3 black sword lights condensed and surrounded the swordsmanship spirit. Each black sword light released an astonishing aura fluctuation, as if it could penetrate and tear through everything. Without any movement, the first black sword light seemed to be held by an invisible hand and shot toward Chen Zong. Its killing intent was extremely shocking. Chen Zong was slightly surprised. Sky Sword Sect? No, it's not. It feels different from the aura fluctuation of Tian Jianzi's Sky Sword Sect. Tian Jianzi narrowed his eyes slightly, looking very surprised. This is not the Sky Sword Sect. The black sword light seemed to be controlled by an invisible hand and shot toward Chen Zong. Its power was amazing, but it was blocked by Chen Zong. Immediately, the second black sword light also shot toward Chen Zong. The third black sword light also shot toward Chen Zong. Kill! The 3 black sword lights were controlled to attack Chen Zong from 3 different directions. Each of the sword lights contained an astonishing amount of power. It was as if 3 swordsman experts had joined forces to attack Chen Zong. Immediately, Chen Zong felt a great deal of pressure. The swordsmanship spirit in an ancient black robe stood still, but its cold and emotionless eyes seemed to be filled with a faint brilliance. Chen Zong stared at the swordsmanship spirit while resisting the attacks of the 3 black sword lights. He was sure that the 3 black sword lights were closely related to the spirit. What kind of trick is this? With a sweep of his sword, Chen Zong blocked the attacks of the 3 black sword lights. He took a step forward and rushed toward the swordsmanship spirit in an instant. His sword broke through the air. However, the 3 black sword lights returned instantly and shot toward Chen Zong, as if they were going to pierce through his back. Chen Zong's body was directly pierced through, but it slowly disappeared. Kill! A sword suddenly shot down from the sky. The sword light swept across, and the sword was infinite. When the sword was about to stab the spirit waved its sword and slashed out an astonishing black sword light in the air, as if it was going to split the sky and the earth. Chen Zong's eyes flashed with a fierce light, and he immediately activated the power of the Blood Thunder Seed. A blood-red thunder light instantly filled the air and poured into the deep night sword. The aura increased, and the power of the sword became more powerful. Pierce through. This sword directly pierced through everything and shattered the swordsmanship spirit's sword light. It directly hit the head of the swordsmanship spirit in an unparalleled and overbearing manner, and pierced through the head like a hot knife through butter. An astonishing power exploded in the body of the swordsmanship spirit, sweeping in all directions and strangling everything. With a boom, the body of the swordsmanship spirit suddenly exploded, leaving only a white crystal. The 3 black sword lights also trembled in an instant and collapsed, turning into 3 broken sword edges. Chen Zong did not hesitate to grab the white crystal. After carefully sensing it, he was suddenly startled. He felt that the aura fluctuations of the white crystal were somewhat familiar, as if he had felt it somewhere before, or as if he already had it. He accepted the inheritance without hesitation. Waves of information poured into his body. After accepting the inheritance, Chen Zong suddenly showed a smile. It flashed by, but the excitement in his eyes could not be concealed. The upper method of spirit control. This inheritance turned out to be the upper method of spirit control. Coincidentally, it was the second part of the upper method of spirit control. Chapter 1648. The art of spirit control was a unique technique that had existed since an unknown era. Chen Zong was certain that the art of spirit control was from the ancient times. Whether it was the inheritance obtained in the Tianyuan ruins or the ancient heavenly sword tomb, it was evident. An inheritance from the ancient times had long been submerged in the long river of time. Today, people might not have heard of it, but Chen Zong, who had obtained the complete inheritance, was certain that it was an extremely brilliant inheritance. It could be called a supreme inheritance. Techniques to cultivate the mind were rare to begin with. Each of them was very precious. The art of spirit control was one of the best. The first part was the foundation, just like the first part of the Sky Sword path. It was used to strengthen the foundation and build a solid foundation, making it easier to cultivate the second part. The first part of the art of spirit control was to constantly refine one's mind so that one's mind, whether in quantity or purity, would surpass the limit and surpass one's cultivation level. Only then could one cultivate the second part. Chen Zong's soul was strong, and his mind was much stronger than cultivators of the same cultivation level. After continuously cultivating the first part of the art of spirit control, the purity of his mind had greatly increased. It had already reached an astonishing level. However, there was a limit to the cultivation of the first part of the art of spirit control. Now, even if Chen Zong were to cultivate the first part of the art of spirit control all the time, he could only keep his mind at the peak state. It was difficult for him to improve it. Now, he had finally obtained the complete inheritance of the art of spirit control. Although Chunzong could not wait to cultivate the second part of the art of spirit control, there were still a few sword tombs left. He planned to explore the tombs first before leaving the ancient heavenly sword tomb and cultivating in seclusion in the outside world. The sword way spirits in the next few sword tombs were indeed very strong. However, Chunzong still defeated them with the power of the blood thunder seed and obtained the inheritance of the crystal. Heaven and Earth line. A sword slashed down from the sky. The sword light was as thin as a strand of hair and was extremely tough. It directly tore the void apart and tore apart the sword light of the sword way spirit like a hot knife through butter, killing it. This was the final sword tomb, the resting place of the 12th Tianjianzi of the Heavenly Sword Mountain. Thank you very much, Chunzong said to Tianjianzi solemnly. This was indeed a rare opportunity. If it weren't for Tianjianzi, he would never have encountered it. After exchanging blows with nearly 200 powerful undead spirits of the sword, witnessing their sword arts and sword Tao, and absorbing their essence into himself, his accumulation of sword arts had become even more profound. He only needed to go into seclusion for a period of time to absorb all of it, and his sword arts would become even more refined. Furthermore, he had obtained many inheritances. Even though he did not need to cultivate some of them, they could be used as a form of accumulation. Among them, there were a few inheritances that he could cultivate to further improve himself. Each takes what he needs. Tianjianzi smiled. This time, Chunzong had obtained great benefits, but he had also obtained the complete Sky Sword Path inheritance. Comparatively speaking, his benefits were not small at all. On the contrary, it was more suitable for him. After all, he was the inheritor of the Heavenly Sword Mountain. With the complete Sky Sword Path, he could break through to the half-step Great Saint Realm. As for the Great Saint Realm, it would depend on his own ability and future opportunities. But no matter what, with the complete Sky Sword Path, the Heavenly Sword Mountain had hope of restoring the glory of the ancient times. Even if it could not traverse the entire Tianyuan sacred region, it could at least become a top sect in the Upper Yuan realm. Under the guidance of Tianjianzi's power, the two returned the way they came. In the underground space 10,000 meters deep in the Heavenly Sword Mountain, Shao Tianjian was meditating while guarding. The Sky Sword Wall, which had been motionless all this time, suddenly trembled. It seemed to release a strong wave of aura that swept out and alarmed Shao Tianjian. Shao Tianjian raised his eyes and stared with excitement. Was Master about to come out? Immediately, a figure with endless sword chi and an earth-shattering sharpness shot out from the gap of the Sky Sword Wall. After landing, it turned into Tianjianzi. Master! Shao Tianjian cried out excitedly. Before his master entered, he already knew that the ancient heavenly sword tomb was full of dangers. His own grandmaster had died in it. This time, his master had found the powerful Jiandi to join forces, but he did not know if it was safe. Now that he saw his master come out alive, Shao Tianjian finally breathed a sigh of relief. Immediately, another sword light shot out. It was Jiandi Chunzong. This time, Tianjianzi did not find his master's body. He did not know if it had disappeared or if it could not be found in the foggy area. It was a pity. However, obtaining the complete inheritance of the Sky Sword Path had fulfilled the wish of every Tianjianzi. The three of them immediately turned into 3 sword lights and flew up into the sky. Soon, they rushed out of the 10,000-meter deep hole and appeared at the top of the Sky Sword Mountain. Jiandi, I'm going to go into seclusion to comprehend the Sky Sword Path. Please forgive me for not being a good host, Tianjianzi said to Chunzong. He could not help but want to comprehend the Sky Sword Path wholeheartedly. I'm shameless enough to request that I can go into seclusion to comprehend it, Chunzong said with a smile. The Sky Sword Mountain was filled with sword chi. There were faint sword essences everywhere. It was a holy land of sword Tao. Comprehending the sword Tao here would undoubtedly be beneficial. It's the Sky Sword Mountain's honor that Jiandi is willing to stay in the mountain to comprehend and practice the sword Tao. Tian Jianzi laughed heartily. This wasn't a compliment at all. After all, the path of a sword emperor was the strongest sword Tao. If he succeeded, his name would shake the myriad of worlds in the future. At that time, when people talked about Jiandi's path of sword Tao, they might mention the Sky Sword Mountain and become famous. Although they were about the same age, and Xiao Tianjian was even older than Chernzong, in terms of seniority, he was inferior to Chernzong. After all, Chernzong was his master, Tian Jianzi, of the same generation. Therefore, Xiao Tianjian stood aside and listened obediently. When Tian Jianzi went into seclusion, Xiao Tianjian went into seclusion as well. Now that he had found the complete Sky Sword Path, he had to put the cultivation of the first part of the Sky Sword Path on the agenda. He wanted to master it as much as possible before transmitting the second part. Before Tian Jianzi went into seclusion, he also transmitted the complete Sky Sword Path to Xiao Tianjian. The master and disciple went into seclusion in a thatched cottage. Chernzong walked around, using his feet to measure the land and using his heart to sense the sword qi. The Sky Sword Mountain was extremely tall. Although it was like a giant sword that pointed straight to the sky, its area was not small. Chernzong wanted to find the best place for seclusion. That way, his cultivation and comprehension would be much easier. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. After spending 3 days, Chernzong walked through the entire Sky Sword Mountain and finally found a suitable place. 4,500 meters away from the Heavenly Sword Mountain, there was a cave that had been opened up countless years ago. Boundless sword qi whistled within the cave. It was filled with strands of extremely dignified sword qi. Clearly, a way of the sword expert had once comprehended the way of the sword here. Indeed, there had been a Tian Jianzi who had opened up this cave with the sword in his hand. He had practiced the sword for 300 years, causing the cave to be filled with a rich sword principle aura. After sealing the cave, Chernzong went into seclusion. Chernzong did not know how long this seclusion would take, but he did not care. After all, he was not in a hurry to go to the profound realm. After nearly 200 battles in the ancient Heavenly Sword Tomb, Chernzong had further accumulated and needed to turn them into his own. In addition, among the various inheritances, there were a few that were worth cultivating. For example, if he could cultivate the Blood Thunder Explosion to the complete realm, he would be able to use it at will, just like the sword principle undead, and the power of each sword would increase significantly. For example, there was still the second part of the spirit control technique that could be cultivated. Dispelling all distracting thoughts, Chernzong began to comprehend wholeheartedly. This comprehension was not about the Blood Thunder Explosion or the spirit control technique, but about the swordsmanship. The accumulation of nearly 200 fierce battles and the swordsmanship from the inheritances, coupled with the environment here, allowed him to achieve twice the result with half the effort. The entire Sky Sword Mountain fell into silence because of this. 1 month. After a month of seclusion, Chernzong's body burst forth with astonishing sword qi fluctuations. They were extremely sharp, as if they could tear everything around them apart. With a strong soul and amazing comprehension, as well as a strong foundation, Chernzong had finally completely transformed the gains of nearly 200 battles into his own, greatly strengthening his own sword principle foundation. Vaguely, the infinite sword chain had improved, and the 2 sword moves, Heaven and Earth Line and Yin and Yang Sword Realm, which were close to the Extreme Realm, had been perfected, and their power had been further enhanced. Next, it was time to comprehend the spirit control technique. The first part was the foundation. Chernzong had cultivated it for a long time and had reached a limit. Now, it was difficult for him to make any more breakthroughs, but it was better for him to cultivate the second part. The first part was for practice, and the second part was for use. The so-called use was for application. The second part of the spirit control technique was more than 10 times more complicated than the upper level, and many times more complicated than the blood thunder explosion. If it were not for Chen Zong's superb comprehension, it would be difficult for him to comprehend anything in a short time. 3 days passed, and he had learned the basics of the second part of the spirit control technique. The second part was the complete application of divine thought. Rise. Chen Zong stared in front of him. There was a sword stuck in the ground. Under the mystery of the second part of the spirit control technique, the sword trembled slightly, pulled out from the ground, and danced in the air. Previously, Chen Zong had used the combination of heart realm and divine thought to achieve this, but he felt that it was a little choppy and heavy. At this moment, using the spirit control technique to control it, he found that it was less choppy and more smooth, but it was not flexible enough. Chen Zong knew that this was because he had not cultivated the second part of the spirit control technique. Comprehend. Cultivate. Sometimes, Chen Zong would take time to cultivate the blood thunder explosion secret technique, and sometimes he would draw his sword and practice it on the spot. They alternated to help him comprehend. In the blink of an eye, another month had passed. Chen Zong had not come out of seclusion, and neither did Tian Jianzi and Xiao Tianjian. They were completely immersed in the comprehension and cultivation of the Sky Sword Doctrine, and had forgotten the passage of time. For powerful cultivators, it was normal for them to go into seclusion to comprehend and cultivate for a few months or even a few years. After all, it was just a small wave in a long life. Chapter 1649. The Sky Sword Mountain was like a giant sword standing on the ground, pointing straight to the sky. Endless sword aura lingered on it, eternal and everlasting. Sword will scattered sporadically, endless and everywhere. As the wind blew, it was instantly rendered by the countless sword aura and became sharp, as if the sword wind had swept past. Sky Sword. A voice sounded from the top of the Sky Sword Mountain. It was full of majesty and seemed to be filled with a mighty aura. Endless sword aura suddenly gathered at the top of the mountain from all directions like a storm. Tian Jianzi stood in the air, his hair and beard fluttering. Every strand of his hair seemed to contain extremely sharp sword aura fluctuations, as if to pierce through the void. Behind him, an illusory giant sword condensed, becoming clearer and clearer. The degree of condensation of the giant sword had exceeded that of the fierce battle with Chen Zong. The aura that permeated the air was so astonishing that it seemed to suppress the surrounding space. As the last word fell, it was like rolling thunder that resounded through the heavens and the earth. The giant sword suddenly flew up and slashed down from the sky. An astonishing power burst out in an instant, splitting the sky and leaving a crack that was hundreds of meters long. It was a ghastly sight, as if to swallow the void. Xiao Tianjian stared at it with a shocked face, and his heart was filled with excitement. So strong. Is this the power of the complete Sky Sword Doctrine? Tian Jianzi was secretly excited. His attack was only the application of the first part of the Sky Sword Doctrine, but its power was more than 50% stronger than before. Sure enough, the complete first part of the Sky Sword Doctrine was even more amazing. After 3 months of closed-door cultivation, Tian Jianzi had completed the first part of the Sky Sword Doctrine and completed the foundation of the Sky Sword Doctrine. Although he had not yet begun to cultivate the second part, the power of the Sky Sword condensed from the first part had greatly increased. At this moment, an extremely tyrannical sword aura suddenly erupted from the mountain and pierced through the sky. The astonishing power seemed to have pierced a huge hole in the sky. This sharpness immediately shocked Tian Jianzi and Xiao Tianjian. They suddenly remembered that there was someone else besides them in closed-door cultivation in the mountain. It was Jiandi. Now, he must have come out of closed-door cultivation. This sword chi made them feel even more powerful and shocking. It was as if nothing in the world could stop it. In the face of this sudden burst of sword chi, Tian Jianzi suddenly felt that his previous slash was nothing. Shocking. He was extremely shocked. Jiandi was indeed Jiandi. As expected of Jiandi. It was simply unimaginable. Taking a deep breath, Tian Jianzi shook his head with a wry smile. He looked at his disciple with some concern. He was fine, as he had long since given up on competing with Jiandi, but his disciple was still very young. He must not be traumatized by this. Xiao Tianjian stared at the sky in a daze, as if it contained some mystery, but his heart was unsettled. He was very young for a cultivator, but compared to Chen Zong, there was an unimaginable and insurmountable gap between them. Exhaling, Xiao Tianjian seemed to have exhaled the unwillingness in his heart. His expression returned to normal, and his eyes became lively again. At that moment, a sword light shot up from below at an astonishing speed. In an instant, it was at the same level as Tian Jianzi in the air. Tian Jianzi was slightly surprised. This speed, fellow cultivator, you've made great progress in this closed-door cultivation, Chen Zong said with a smile. I've made some progress, but it's still incomparable to Jiandi's, Tian Jianzi said with a smile. Chen Zong was not modest. He had indeed made great progress in these 3 months of closed-door cultivation. It was very shocking. His cultivation was still at the early stage of the 8th Heaven Saint Realm and the middle stage of the 8th Heaven Chaotic Heaven Realm, but his strength had improved a lot, and he had more combat skills. It could be said that he could take on 2 people at the same time 3 months ago. Many thanks. Chen Zong expressed his gratitude to Tian Jianzi. Not only did he enter the ancient Heavenly Sword Tomb, but he also stayed in the Heavenly Sword Mountain for closed-door cultivation. I also want to thank Jiandi. If it weren't for Jiandi's help, I wouldn't have been able to obtain the complete inheritance of the Sky Sword Sect, Tian Jianzi said with a smile. There was no harm in making friends with people like Chen Zong, who had endless potential. Fellow cultivator, do you know who the Grandmaster Artificer in the Upper Yuan realm is? Chen Zong asked. The Grandmaster Artificer. Tian Jianzi pondered for a moment, then said, in the Upper Yuan realm, there is one person who can be called a Grandmaster. His name is the Tiangong Elder, but his whereabouts are uncertain. Almost no one knows where he is. It's too difficult to find him. In addition to the Tiangong Elder, there is another person who can barely be considered a Grandmaster. His name is Tianlingzi. We know where he is, but his temperament is different from ordinary people. If we want to ask him to help, we have to agree to some of his conditions. It's not easy, Tian Jianzi said slowly. But where is Tianlingzi? Chen Zong asked. Although the Tiangong Elder sounded more capable, his whereabouts were uncertain. It would take a long time to find him, and he might not be able to find him. If that was the case, he might as well look for Tianlingzi. If the conditions were not too difficult, it would not be a problem. Tianlingzi is in Tianling Mountain, Tian Jianzi said. Heaven Spirit Mountain was considered a rather famous mountain in the upper primordial realm. Of course, some mountains were famous by themselves, but some mountains were famous because of people. Tianling Mountain belonged to the latter. The direction of Tianling Mountain was the direction to the profound realm. It would save them some trouble. Therefore, Chen Zong also said goodbye and quickly left the Sky Sword Mountain. Tian Jianzi and Xiao Tianjian watched Chen Zong's back as he left. They were speechless for a long time. After witnessing Chen Zong's ability and witnessing the rise of a future Supreme Master, there was an indescribable complex feeling in their hearts. Jiandi. This was the style of Jiandi. Chen Zong flew in the air at a much faster speed than before. Among the many inheritances that Chen Zong obtained in the ancient Sky Sword Tomb, a few of them were inheritances of movement technique. After absorbing the essence, he immediately improved his movement technique. Although the heavenly wind formless movement technique was still in the realm of great success, it was more profound and easier to use. The reason why Chen Zong asked about Tianjianzi's forging grandmaster was that he wanted to forge a divine weapon for himself. The first part of the spirit reigning technique was the basic part. It specialized in tempering one's divine sense and building a solid foundation. The second part was about the application of divine sense. In addition, the last part of the second part was about the forging of a divine weapon. A divine weapon was a divine sense weapon that was most compatible with the spirit reigning technique, so it was abbreviated as a divine weapon. Although Chernzong had some forging skills, he had learned them a long time ago and hadn't studied them thoroughly. Therefore, they could only be regarded as ordinary. However, the requirements for forging a divine weapon were too high, so Chernzong couldn't do it. Of course, Chernzong couldn't waste time studying forging. It wasn't his pursuit. If he could successfully forge a divine weapon and use it with the spirit reigning technique, its power would be extraordinary. Tianling Mountain wasn't very high. It was less than 2,000 meters high, but it was very famous. There was an endless stream of people who often visited. When Chernzong arrived at Tianling Mountain, he saw a lot of people gathered at the foot of Tianling Mountain. There were dozens of people. Some looked older, some looked younger. There were both men and women. Regardless of gender, age, or appearance, all of them were exuding astonishing auras. Obviously, all of them were Saint Rudiment stage masters, and at least intermediate Saint Rudiment stage masters. Before he came, Tianjianzi also told Chernzong about Tianlingzi's rules. Those who wanted to visit him and ask him to forge a divine weapon had to abide by the rules. This rule was that one couldn't fly to Tianling Mountain. One had to climb from the foot of the mountain to the top. As for the divine weapon, it was just a saying. It wasn't a divine weapon that was a divine sense weapon, but a relatively powerful saint artifact. Most of the saint artifacts that one usually bought were ordinary saint artifacts. Even a fine-grade saint artifact couldn't be compared to a tailor-made saint artifact. It would be more compatible with one's body, and one's advantages would be more thoroughly displayed. Since he came to visit Tianlingzi, Chernzong had to abide by the rules. Even if it was a half-step great saint realm master, Tianlingzi wouldn't give him face. Of course, if it was a supreme master of the great saint realm, Tianlingzi would have to be very respectful. Of course, the divine weapon used by a supreme master of the great saint realm couldn't be forged by Tianlingzi. Even a true grandmaster Tiangong elder couldn't do it. In most cases, supreme masters of the great saint realm wouldn't come to Tianlingzi. Several dozen Saint Realm intermediate stage masters were intercepted at the foot of the mountain and were unable to ascend. The one who intercepted them was a young man with a plain appearance and a face full of pockmarks. His appearance was quite ordinary, but he held his head high and puffed out his chest, giving him an air of arrogance. The fluctuation of his aura wasn't strong. He was only at the half-step Saint Realm. This person was Tianlingzi, Shoshan Tongzi of Tianling Mountain. Because he was the Shoshan Tongzi of Tianling Mountain, this boy knew that the purpose of visiting Tianling Mountain was to ask for Tianlingzi's help. Therefore, he lowered his attitude. In the beginning, Shoshan Tongzi was a little afraid. After all, the people who came to visit were all Saint Realm masters. They were powerful existences who could kill him with just a finger. But as time passed, he wasn't afraid anymore. He used the tiger's might to intimidate others. Mountain Master is resting now. You guys wait here for a while. Shoshan Tongzi waved his hand arrogantly. It was as if he was the master of Tianling Mountain, Tianlingzi. Little brother, when will Tianlingzi wake up? A sixth heaven saint realm old man asked with a smile. He took out 10 earth restoration pills and handed them to Shoshan Tongzi. Shoshan Tongzi pretended to put away the 10 earth restoration pills. However, He looked a little lazy. It was as if he didn't care about the 10 Earth restoration pills. Wait a moment. Let me ask, Shoshan Tongzi said as he slowly took out an item to contact the others on the mountain. Wait a moment. Mountain Master is still resting, Shoshan Tongzi said again. Then, he glanced around and closed his eyes again. The old man's expression changed slightly. He wanted to get angry, but he could only force himself to hold it in. It was easy to get angry, but he would lose the opportunity to ask Tian Lingzi to forge a divine weapon for him. Chapter 1650. At the foot of Heavenly Spirit Mountain, more and more people were waiting. There were already more than 100 of them, and the lowest cultivation base was at the 5th Heaven Saint Rudiment stage. A 9th Heaven Saint Rudiment stage powerhouse stepped forward and handed a heavenly primary pill to the Shoshan Tongzi. May I ask if Grandmaster Tian Lingzi has woken up? The 9th Heaven Saint Rudiment stage powerhouse asked gently with a smile on his face. Wait a moment, let me ask. Although the Shoshan Tongzi was arrogant, he knew the other party was extraordinary, so he did not dare to act rashly. However, he was not as nervous as the other half-saint stage powerhouses. The Mountain Master has woken up, but he can only meet one person first, the Shoshan Tongzi said. Then, he asked the 9th Heaven Saint Rudiment stage powerhouse to climb the mountain first. The others could only continue to wait. Chen Zong could see that the Shoshan Tongzi was acting arrogantly by relying on his power. However, it was also a kind of ability, so it was not a big deal. Under normal circumstances, Chen Zong would not break other people's rules unless it was an emergency. However, it was not an emergency now, so he could wait and cultivate at the same time. One after another, some succeeded in climbing the mountain, while others were stopped. Chen Zong could see that one had to pay a price to climb the mountain directly. For example, a heavenly primary pill. Therefore, Chen Zong took out a heavenly primary pill and gave it to the other party. He was just a nobody at the half-saint stage. He could kill him many times with a puff of his breath. As long as he did not really provoke him, Chen Zong would not make a fuss about it. It was really boring to bully the weak. With Chen Zong's speed, he soon reached the top of Heavenly Spirit Mountain. There was a huge and majestic palace at the top of the mountain. It seemed to be made of countless metals, and it emitted a solemn and awe-inspiring aura. When Chen Zong stepped into it, he still did not see Tian Lingzi. Instead, he was arranged to wait in a palace. The person in charge here was a disciple of Tian Lingzi. Please state your cultivation base, name, and origin. The Tian Lingzi disciple walked up to Chen Zong and said unhurriedly. Even though his cultivation was only at the early saint realm, he didn't seem to be afraid at all, as if he had something to rely on. My name is Chen Zong. I'm at the early stage of the 8th Heaven Saint Rudiment stage. Chen Zong replied unhurriedly. However, he secretly thought that this Tian Lingzi was really arrogant, or rather, had a very strange temperament. However, Tian Jianzi had warned him before he came. Since Chen Zong had decided to come, he was mentally prepared. Hearing Chen Zong's name, the Tian Lingzi disciple's face showed a hint of surprise, as if he had heard of him before. This was normal. After all, Chen Zong had consecutively defeated a group of Sword Dao Masters on the Upper Yuan Sky Sword list. Even the number 1 on the Upper Yuan Sky Sword list, Tian Jianzi, was no match for him. Jiandi's name had already spread far and wide. Wait a moment, I'll go ask Master. The Tian Lingzi disciple's tone became gentler. Jiandi, he was extraordinary. Even a master like Tian Jianzi was no match for him. A master naturally had to be treated as a master. The conditions given by Tian Lingzi often varied from person to person. Chen Zong did not know what conditions Tian Lingzi would give him, but since he was here, he had to give it a try. Perhaps the conditions would not be difficult for him. The people waiting in the hall were called to leave one by one. Not long after, when they reappeared, some looked dignified, some looked happy, and some looked unhappy. Obviously, some people had agreed to Tianlingzi's conditions, but the conditions were harsh and not easy to fulfill, so they looked dignified. Some people's conditions were relatively easy, so they were happy. Some people's conditions were very harsh, almost impossible to fulfill, so they naturally looked unhappy. Even so, they did not dare to get angry. In comparison, the other party was Tianlingzi, second only to the Tiangong elder, and was known as a master forger. If they offended him, the consequences would be very serious. For example, if he gave a condition and said that he wanted to deal with someone, then many people would come to deal with that person. It would be difficult to move an inch, and they might even be killed. Therefore, even if they were dissatisfied with Tianlingzi's harsh conditions, they could not get angry here. They could only endure it. Tianlingzi certainly could see that, but so what? Unless you were a master half a step away from the great saint level, Tianlingzi would give you more face. One by one, it was finally Chen Zong's turn. Chen Zong stepped out of the waiting hall. Led by Tianlingzi's disciple, he walked through a long corridor and kept walking forward. Dim lights were burning on both sides of the corridor. Master is inside. Tianlingzi's disciple bowed slightly and said. Pushing the door open, Chen Zong stepped in. As soon as Chen Zong entered, he felt a blazing aura sweeping through, like rolling waves surging endlessly. What came into view was a huge furnace. The furnace was 20 meters high and 30 meters wide. It was burning with an extremely red fire, as if it had turned into a substance, as if it could burn everything between heaven and earth into ashes. Tianlingzi was a middle-aged man in fiery red armor. His cheeks were thin and sunken, and he seemed to be malnourished. However, his eyes were extremely sharp, as if they could see through everything. His fiery gaze landed on Chen Zong. For a moment, Chen Zong felt as though he had been set on fire, as though he was being burned by a raging inferno. Chen Zong's gaze also swept across and fixed on him. He made a judgment in an instant. Tianlingzi's cultivation was at the peak of the ninth heaven saint realm. The cultivation technique he cultivated was of the highest quality of the saint grade. Moreover, it was a fire attribute cultivation technique, and he even mastered the rare heavenly fire. In other words, Tianlingzi's strength was not weak. Tian Jianzi once said that Tianlingzi was ranked 6th on the Shangyuan heaven list. That was his ranking 100 years ago. As for whether he was stronger now, he should be. As for how much stronger he was, it was hard to say. Whether it was his personal strength or his identity as a Grandmaster Artificer, Tianlingzi's status was higher than other cultivators. Even experts like Tian Jianzi did not want to directly become enemies with Tianlingzi. Jiandi? Tianlingzi asked. His fiery gaze became even more intense. I am. Chen Zong said, Sir Tianlingzi, I need to forge a divine sense weapon. Are you sure you can do it? A divine sense weapon was different from a saint-grade artifact. It was more difficult. Therefore, Chen Zong did not know whether Tianlingzi could forge it. He needed to ask first. A divine sense weapon? Tianlingzi was slightly stunned. He did not expect such a request. To be honest, he had never forged a divine sense weapon, but he had heard of it. I have never forged one before, but I can try. I wonder if Jiandi has a forging blueprint? Tianlingzi asked. He did not seem to have a strange temperament. Yes. Chen Zong would certainly make the necessary preparations. He immediately took out a scroll and flew it to Tianlingzi. It was a part of the Imperial God weapon that Chen Zong had drawn. The Imperial God weapon was a unique divine weapon of the Imperial God technique. Without the Imperial God technique, it was useless. However, Chen Zong did not want to expose the Imperial God weapon completely before the negotiation. He had to hold back. Tianlingzi took the scroll and opened it. He looked at it carefully. He was instantly immersed in it. Time passed slowly. When Tian Lingzi finished looking at it over and over again, 2 hours had passed. I can try to forge it, but I am not sure if I will succeed. Tian Lingzi raised his head and stared at Chen Zong. His tone was sharper and more powerful. You need to prepare the materials yourself. The materials needed to forge the Imperial God weapon were not ordinary. Chen Zong had most of them. There was only one material that he had not obtained yet. That material was called the soul-dissolving stone. Chen Zong planned to find Tian Lingzi first. After confirming it, he would look for the soul-dissolving stone. Whether he looked for it himself or asked someone else to look for it, he had a way. What are the conditions? Chen Zong asked. The conditions were one of the key points. If Tian Lingzi's conditions were too harsh, Chen Zong would certainly not agree. 100 years. Tian Lingzi stretched out a finger and stared at Chen Zong with bright eyes. You will stay in Tianling Mountain for 100 years and be used by me. Chen Zong frowned slightly when he heard that. 100 years. If he was used by Tian Lingzi, it meant that he would become Tian Lingzi's subordinate for the next 100 years. This condition was very harsh for Chen Zong. Chen Zong would never agree. 100 years was not a short time for him. Besides, he had to listen to Tian Lingzi's orders. In addition, Tian Lingzi did not have much confidence in forging the Imperial God weapon. Therefore, Chen Zong refused without hesitation and took back the scroll. After being refused, Tian Lingzi's expression changed greatly. His eyes became cold and his voice became sharper. You have to think about it carefully. Besides me, you can't find anyone else to forge the Imperial God weapon for you. The Upper Yuan realm is not the only Tian Yuan sacred region. You are not the only Grandmaster Forger. Chen Zong responded unhurriedly. He got up and walked away. Tian Lingzi's expression became colder and colder. His eyes were full of anger. You should know that I am a Grandmaster Forger. No matter which world I am in, my status is high. There are many people who are willing to listen to my orders. If I want to deal with you, you will not be able to do anything. Tian Lingzi's voice was full of threat. 50 years. You only need to stay in Tianling Mountain for 50 years. After 50 years, I will forge the Imperial God weapon for you. Chen Zong did not have the slightest intention to pay attention to him this time. He left directly. Just as Tian Jianzi said, Tian Lingzi was not easy to deal with. However, even if Tian Lingzi threatened him, Chen Zong was not afraid at all. Whoever dared to make an enemy out of him for Tian Lingzi would have to be prepared to face the sword in his hand. The sword was a weapon of slaughter. Tian Lingzi's eyes flashed with faint flames. He stared at Chen Zong's back as he left. Anger emerged from his heart and spread throughout his body. Traces of killing intent surged endlessly. The flames in the huge furnace seemed to be attracted and became more and more blazing. Wisps of flames rushed out like the tongues of fire dragons, burning the void. This was the real Tian Lingzi. His temperament was unpredictable. Chen Zong walked out of the palace. His expression was calm. No one could tell whether he had reached an agreement with Tian Lingzi or not. Step by step, Chen Zong walked down the mountain. He was thinking about what to do next. The Imperial God weapon must be forged. It was a weapon that could strengthen himself. He could not let it go. Chapter 1651. Sky Spirit Mountain was getting farther and farther behind him. Chen Zong kept moving forward. There was a city a few hundred miles away from Sky Spirit Mountain. Chen Zong planned to enter the city to scout for information and see if he could find a soul-dissolving stone. To forge a royal god weapon, a soul-dissolving stone must be found. It was one of the main materials for forging a royal god weapon. Its function was to fuse it into a royal god weapon and make it more compatible with the divine thought. Only then could the royal god weapon be truly controlled by the divine thought and exert its full power. It could be said that without a treasure like the soul-dissolving stone, which could fuse the divine thought weapon would be incomplete. Whether Tian Lingzi was willing to forge a royal god weapon for him or not, he had to find the soul-dissolving stone. It was just a matter of time. Chen Zong was not sure whether it was easy to find the soul-dissolving stone in the profound realm. Therefore, he started from the upper Yuan realm. It would be best if he could find it, but if not, he could only go to the profound realm. Although the soul-dissolving stone was a rare treasure, it still existed. This city was called Flying Spirit City. It had nothing to do with Tianlingzi. The largest shop in Flying Spirit City was called Myriad Spirit Pavilion. It was a famous shop in the Upper Yuan realm that sold all kinds of rare treasures. There was a saying in Myriad Spirit Pavilion, "There is no treasure that cannot be bought in Myriad Spirit Pavilion. If there is, you will not find it even if you search the entire Upper Yuan realm." This was because Myriad Spirit Pavilion not only sold all kinds of rare treasures, but also sold all kinds of information. Even if there was no treasure at the moment, they would use all kinds of channels to find information about the treasure. Ordinary people did not know Chen Zong's identity, but the people in Myriad Spirit Pavilion were well informed. When Chen Zong stepped into Myriad Spirit Pavilion, they immediately acted and learned about Chen Zong's identity. Jiandi, a very powerful expert. Naturally, someone of high status came to receive him. Jiandi's arrival brings light to Myriad Spirit Pavilion. The person who received Chen Zong was a thin and short middle-aged man. He said with a warm smile, "I am Zhao Feng, the manager of Myriad Spirit Pavilion. May I know why Jiandi is here?" Jiandi, although it was amazing, and its potential and talent were the best of the generation, the Myriad Spirit Pavilion was not simple either. It had stood in the Upper Yuan realm for many years, and there were many half-step Great Saint powerhouses and countless Saint Realm powerhouses. It had a deep foundation and amazing financial resources, and it even had a Great Saint powerhouse as its backer. They were not afraid of even a top half-step Great Saint powerhouse, so naturally, they would not be afraid of Chen Zong. Only when Chen Zong became a supreme expert of the Great Saint realm would the people of the Myriad Spirit Pavilion be truly respectful. As for now, there was still a long way to go. Manager Zhao is too polite. Chen Zong smiled and said directly, "I wonder if there is any soul-dissolving stone in the Wanling Pavilion, or any news about it." Soul-melting stone. A weird light flashed through Zhao Feng's eyes before he shook his head regretfully. "According to what I know, the 10,000 Spirit Pavilion does have a soul-merging stone. Then where are you now? Can you tell me?" Chen Zong's eyes flashed with excitement. The soul-dissolving stone was a rare treasure. Although it existed, it wasn't easy to obtain it. Sometimes it was just a coincidence. Not long ago, the only soul-dissolving stone in the Wanling Pavilion was bought by someone. Zhao Feng shook his head and said with regret, "The person who bought it was Tianlingzi." Tianlingzi. Hearing this name, Chen Zong knew that Tianlingzi had started to target him. Soul-melting stones were needed to forge royal divine weapons. The soul-dissolving stone was the most precious and difficult to find. Tian Jianzi had said that Tianlingzi was not only eccentric, but also narrow-minded and temperamental. He would even seek revenge for the slightest grievance. It seemed that Tianlingzi really hated him. But I wonder if the Wanling Pavilion can find any news about other soul-dissolving stones? Chen Zong asked. The soul-dissolving stone is extremely precious. The Wanling Pavilion paid a great price to get the one that was kept before. It's too difficult to find a second one. I don't think it'll be possible in a short time. Zhao Feng said, and then changed the topic. But if Jiandi needs it, I can order all the Wanling pavilions in the Upper Yuan realm to look for news about other soul-dissolving stones. Once they find any, inform Jiandi immediately. Okay. Chen Zong nodded. For now, this was the only way. Chernzong planned to stay in the Flying Spirit City for a while to see if he could find any news about the soul-dissolving stone. The sooner, the better. But Chernzong also knew that this matter couldn't be rushed. Since Tian Lingzi deliberately targeted him and took away the soul-dissolving stone, Chernzong didn't want to find her, unless it was absolutely necessary. Waiting didn't mean that Chernzong had nothing to do. Cultivation was necessary, and so was comprehension. Whether it was qi refining or body refining, it was more difficult to improve in the later stages. Although Dao intent was important, it was too difficult to break through to the extreme realm. Relatively speaking, it was easier to improve one's cultivation. Therefore, Chernzong paid a great price to buy some elixirs from the Wanling Pavilion to help qi refining and body refining. In Tianling Mountain, Tian Lingzi sneered when she got the relevant news. You won't get any soul-dissolving stones. If the Wanling Pavilion has any news about soul-dissolving stones, tell me immediately, Tian Lingzi ordered in a sharp voice. The soul-dissolving stones kept by the Wanling Pavilion was taken away by her. Her purpose was to make things difficult for Chernzong. If Chernzong didn't agree to her conditions, she wouldn't be able to do anything. The reason why the Wanling Pavilion gave in to Tian Lingzi was not only because of Tian Lingzi's identity, but also because she had a good relationship with a senior member of the Wanling Pavilion. Chernzong didn't know this. Waiting. Month after month passed. For 3 months, Chernzong cultivated and paid attention to the news of the Wanling Pavilion. Half a year. After staying in the Flying Spirit City for half a year, Chernzong got the news from the Wanling Pavilion. He immediately rushed to the Wanling Pavilion to see the Peak Lord Zhao. The Wanling Pavilion mobilized all its forces and spent half a year to find the whereabouts of a soul-dissolving stone. Unfortunately, we were still a little late, Zhao Feng said with a wry smile. Why? Chernzong's face darkened. After waiting for half a year, the result was still the same. Even with Chernzong's temperament, he couldn't help but feel unhappy. Tian Lingzi has a good relationship with a senior member of the Wanling Pavilion, Zhao Feng said and didn't say anything else. Chernzong wasn't a fool. He understood immediately. Tian Lingzi. Chernzong frowned. Obviously, the first soul-dissolving stone was taken by Tian Lingzi, and the second one fell into the hands of Tian Lingzi. Obviously, Tian Lingzi wanted to fight him to the death. Thank you for telling me. Chernzong cupped his hands to Zhao Feng and left immediately. Zhao Feng didn't ask him to stay, nor did he say anything else. He just looked at Chernzong's back and sighed. Something was about to happen. Chernzong's expression was calm, and his eyes were also calm, but a trace of anger was gradually gathering in his heart. Everything couldn't be repeated. Tian Lingzi wanted to fight him to the death. After all, if there was a first time and a second time, then there would be a third time. That was to say, if Chernzong found the soul-dissolving stone in the Upper Yuan realm, Tian Lingzi would interfere again. Unless he left the Upper Yuan realm and went to the Extreme Mystery realm to look for it, but that would be a bit embarrassing. Since the soul-dissolving stone is in your hands, it's perfect for me to go and get it. Chernzong thought to himself. After leaving the city, he immediately flew into the sky and turned into a gust of wind, flying toward Tianling Mountain at an amazing speed. At the top of Tianling Mountain, there were 10 figures in front of Tian Lingzi, each of them exuding an amazing aura. Everyone, as long as you do this, I will forge secret treasures for you, Tian Lingzi said very directly. The conditions had been agreed. Now, they were waiting for the fish to take the initiative to enter the net. Presumably, the fish would take the initiative to enter the net soon. Not long after, Tian Lingzi's expression changed slightly, and his eyes shone with a touch of pride. Everyone, it's time for you to make a move, Tian Lingzi said with a smile, as if he had everything under control. He's just a junior. It's easy to catch him. No matter how powerful he is, the 10 of us together are not a match for him. The 10 people moved one after another, and the aura they leaked seemed to stir up the wind and the clouds, shaking in all directions. On Tianling Mountain, a figure rushed up. This time, Chen Zong did not follow any rules and climbed from the foot of the mountain. In an instant, Chen Zong arrived at the top of Tianling Mountain, and his tyrannical aura spread out, full of endless sharpness, as if it could cut and tear everything between heaven and earth into pieces. Strong. Very strong. It was shockingly tyrannical. At the same time, 10 tyrannical auras burst out in an instant, soaring into the sky, and instantly shattered Chen Zong's extremely sharp aura. Chen Zong's eyes narrowed slightly, and he saw 10 figures emitting tyrannical auras fly up from the palace below, directly surrounding him. These 10 figures were all powerhouses at the peak of the 9th Heaven Saint realm. Each of their auras was extraordinary, and their strength was tyrannical. They were all powerhouses on the Shangyuan Heaven list. Tianlingzi, do you think the 10 of them can stop me? Chen Zong stared down, locking his gaze on the figure standing at the entrance of the palace, and said with a hint of coldness in his voice, "You're indeed strong to be able to defeat Tianjianzi. The 10 of them may not be your opponents, but with the secret treasure this master has forged, you're definitely no match for them." Tianlingzi sneered confidently, his sharp eyes staring at Chen Zong. "My conditions are still valid. As long as you agree, this master will not only forge the imperial divine weapon for you, but also give you the soul-dissolving stone. Then let's see how you're going to stop me." Chen Zong's eyes flashed with a cold light, as sharp as the edge of a sword. In an instant, Tianlingzi's heart skipped a beat, and he felt as if he had been pierced, faintly feeling his scalp go numb. However, Tianlingzi seemed to be very confident in the secret treasure he had forged. Fight. In an instant, the auras of the 10 powerhouses seemed to be drawn by some invisible force, and in an instant, they blended together as if they were one, becoming one, as if they were formed by nature. Chapter 1652. Boom. 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 When the auras of the 10-peak 9th Heaven Saint realm powerhouses merged into one, they completely erupted. Although they were ranked at the bottom of the Shangyuan Heaven ranking, when they completely erupted and merged with each other, they became extremely terrifying. They were far stronger than Tianjianzi. With such strength, even the top powerhouse on the Shangyuan Heaven ranking was probably no match for them. It was because of this that Tianlingzi had the confidence to deal with Chen Zong. After all, Chen Zong had defeated Tianjianzi and was famous. There was no doubt about his strength. 10 auras that were integrated as one directly struck Chen Zong's body. It was like an ancient mountain that came from ancient times, pressing down from the sky, wanting to suppress Chen Zong on the spot, causing him to be unable to move. This pressure did indeed make Chen Zong feel extremely pressured. If it were before he had entered the ancient heavenly sword tomb, Chen Zong would have found it very difficult to withstand this pressure. However, even though it was difficult now, he was still able to withstand it. The 10 powerhouses' faces suddenly became extremely solemn. Using the secret treasure forged by Tianlingzi, the auras of the 10 powerhouses were connected as one. There was an unprecedented feeling of power, as if everyone's strength had been increased tenfold in an instant. Such an increase in power was astonishing. However, Chen Zong could still withstand the pressure emitted by them. Judging from his expression, it did not seem to be very difficult. In the face of such an extremely tyrannical pressure, Chen Zong's heart was a little heavy. At the same time, he was also a little excited. It was hard to find a strong opponent. Fight. In an instant, the 10 experts attacked at the same time. Although their moves were different, they all unleashed an extremely shocking attack in an instant. Not only did they not interfere with each other, they even seemed to be connected to each other. They locked down all the space in the surroundings and blasted towards Chen Zong, making it impossible for him to dodge. He could only take it head-on. The deep night sword was unsheathed, and a pitch-black sword light streaked across the sky. An extremely shocking sharpness burst out in an instant, as if it could cut through heaven and earth, and instantly cut open the astonishing pressure. Chen Zong's figure flashed in an instant, turning into an invisible gust of wind, and swept through the gap in the pressure in an instant. The sword suddenly turned into a pitch-black shadow, streaking across the void and killing one of the powerhouses. The power of the sword was extremely shocking. It was enough to kill an ordinary peak 9th Heaven Saint Realm powerhouse. None of the 10 powerhouses could withstand it in a one-on-one situation, but at this moment they were connecting their auras and strength with their secret treasures, so that everyone's strength could increase in an instant. Pull one hair and the whole body will be affected. In an instant, not only did Chen Zong's sword not work, but he was once again attacked by the 10 powerhouses. Facing the attacks of 10 powerhouses at the same time, Chen Zong was under a lot of pressure. Tian Lingzi stood in front of the palace with a sneer on his face. He was very confident in the secret treasure he had forged, but unfortunately, the secret treasure was a one-time use item, and it was not easy to forge. After using it this time, it was unknown whether he could forge it again in the future. After all, he had forged it by chance. However, as long as he could defeat and subdue the other party, the secret treasure would be valuable. That's right, Tian Lingzi's ultimate goal was to subdue Jiandi for his own use. Jiandi? What kind of talent was this? If he could make use of it, there would be a real powerhouse guarding Tianling Mountain in the future. What's more, Tian Lingzi was not satisfied with the current situation. He still wanted to go further, but his own strength was not enough. He needed someone he could trust to help him fight. It was extremely fierce. Chen Zong was 1 against 10. The power of the secret treasure temporarily connected everyone's strength, and their strength soared. Even Tian Jianzi was no match for them and would be suppressed. Chen Zong's strength was much stronger than before, so he could resist for a while and think of a way to break it. Chen Zong did not know the effect of the secret treasure. Instead of relying on luck, it was better to find a way to break it himself. How to break it? Break it with skill. Break it with brute force. Chain. For a moment, the sword light overlapped and dissolved the tyrannical attack. However, the attacks of the 10 powerhouses were endless, trying to break the chain of sword light. This series of moves was profound, but it was unable to withstand such a dense and tyrannical attack. For a moment, Chen Zong felt as if he was in the middle of an extremely terrifying storm, and his entire body seemed to be about to be torn apart and turned into powder. Chen Zong didn't show any signs of fear in the face of danger. He raised his sword and chopped down. It was as light as a feather, without any strength. It was as light and agile as smoke. The black and white light diffused and separated into two sides. In an instant, it was as if heaven and earth were divided into two, yin and yang, and then began to rotate. The black and white light surrounded Chen Zong, and a mysterious aura of its own spread out. Yin and Yang Sword Realm. This was a defensive unique skill. It was the most powerful defensive unique skill that Chen Zong had mastered. The tyrannical attacks bombarded the Yin and Yang Sword Realm, but they were directly blocked, as if they were penetrating the void. Their strength was constantly being consumed, and they could not cause any harm to Chen Zong. Attacks, continuous attacks, endless attacks, but they could not do anything to Chen Zong. No matter how dense the attacks were, there would be a pause. Chen Zong was waiting for this moment. That was his chance to counterattack. Under the continuous attacks, the sky seemed to have been shattered. Endless storms raged as if they were going to shatter Heaven's Spirit Mountain. Tian Lingzi's face was filled with shock. With such power, if he were to get close to it with his strength, only death would await him. Fortunately, he was willing to take out the secret treasure and promised the 10 people some benefit. Otherwise, he would be helpless in the face of the angry Jiandi. Tian Lingzi always knew that strength was the most important thing. Everything else was secondary. Without great strength, It did not matter how high one's status was. If someone wanted to kill him, he could kill him directly. But if he was strong enough, no one would dare to deal with him. As long as he subdued the Jiendi and trained it for a period of time, its strength would increase greatly. At that time, he would be able to obtain an opportunity for a real metamorphosis. Thinking of this, Tianlingzi's heart was suddenly filled with passion. The 10 people's attacks were extremely crazy, but they could not do anything to the Yin-Yang sword realm. In an instant, the 10 people paused slightly. After all, they were still humans, not gods. They could not keep attacking. It was only a slight pause, but it allowed Chen Zong to seize the opportunity. The Yin-Yang sword world stopped in an instant, and then the black and white colors became completely distinct. After that, countless strands of sword chi, sword lights, and sword lights surged into appearance and suffused the surroundings. Every single strand of sword light emanated an extremely shocking sharp aura that caused one's entire body to go cold. Below, Tianlingzi felt his whole body tremble unconsciously, as if a cold current from the extreme north had swept past him. His hair stood on end. Heaven and earth were aligned. In an instant, with Chernzong's raised sword as the center, darkness spread. The entire sky above Tianling Mountain seemed to fall into dusk in an instant, like the sun setting in the west. It was gradually getting dark, waiting for the night to come. The originally pitch-black sunken night sword condensed a ray of light in an instant. It was like the dark light at the edge of a solar eclipse, making people sink into eternal darkness. In an instant, endless sword chi, sword light, and sword radiance poured into the sunken night sword. As the sword slashed out, it turned into a wisp of condensed, pitch-black sword light. The sword light was extremely dark, as if it wanted to make everything in the world sink into darkness. After the trip to the ancient heavenly sword tomb and several months of closed-door meditation by Chenzong, the power of the line of heaven and earth had been further enhanced. It had multiplied. Compared to before entering the ancient heavenly sword tomb, its power had multiplied. Blood, thunder, explosion. The sword slashed down without a sound, but the sky seemed to be split in half in an instant. Seeing the hair-like black but extremely bright sword radiance, which seemed to be suffused with a touch of blood, Tianlingzi felt as if his soul had left his body. The power of the 10 people was also cut off in an instant. There seemed to be a cracking sound. It was the sound of something breaking. Then, the auras of the 10 people rapidly decreased, and their auras became chaotic in an instant, like clear water becoming turbid. Chenzong waved his sword mercilessly. The sunken night sword slashed out in an instant. It was like a crescent moon was hanging in the air around him, cutting through the void and slashing through the bodies of the 10 extreme Saint Realm Masters at the same time. The Yin and Yang sword realm blocked any attack. The line of heaven and earth split all defenses. With one attack and one defense, Chernzong was in an invincible position. 10 corpses that had been cut in half at the waist fell. Tianlingzi's face suddenly changed. His face turned pale, and his eyes were filled with fear. Chernzong's figure quickly descended and landed in front of Tianlingzi. Hand over the soul-dissolving stone. Chernzong stared at Tianlingzi. His eyes were extremely sharp, like sharp swords shooting out from the sky, as if he wanted to pierce Tianlingzi's soul. Impossible! Although Tianlingzi was frightened, he still had no intention of giving in. Don't think that you can get the soul-dissolving stone from this Grandmaster by killing those 10 wastes. Let me tell you, one of my brothers is a half-step great saint from Myriad Spirit Pavilion. I advise you to leave now, and I can also guarantee that I won't target you again. Hand over the soul-dissolving stone yourself, or I'll find it from your corpse. Chernzong was not moved at all. A half-step great saint was indeed very threatening, but so what? Tianlingzi had targeted him time and time again. Did he really think that he was easy to provoke? When a master was angry, corpses would float for thousands of miles. Since Tianlingzi wanted to target him, he should be prepared to face his anger. Okay, I'll give you the soul-dissolving stone, Tianlingzi said bitterly. He immediately waved his hand, and a black mass appeared in his hand and threw it at Chen Zong. A hair-raising sense of crisis suddenly exploded and swept through Chen Zong. The power of Lingwu, Yin and Yang sword realm, unbreakable gilded body. In an instant, Chen Zong broke out all his strength to defend himself. Boom! There was an earth-shattering explosion. The whole Tianling mountain was shaking in an instant, as if it was going to collapse. The palace on the top of the mountain was hit by a terrible force and disintegrated in an instant. Dust and smoke billowed, and a strong force rushed straight up into the sky. It gradually diffused, as if a huge mushroom had suddenly grown on the top of Tianling Mountain. Chapter 1653. The explosion was earth-shattering, destroying everything. Tianlingzi appeared several thousand meters away and stared at the epicenter of the explosion. The astonishing power caused everyone's expression to change drastically. With such power, even a half-step Great Saint Realm Master would be in danger, let alone a Saint Realm Master. What a pity! Tianlingzi thought to himself, his heart full of regret. His original intention was to subdue the other party for his own use. For this reason, he had to use the artifact that he had forged by chance. He didn't expect that under such circumstances, he still couldn't deal with the other party. The other party's strength was indeed terrifying and amazing, so much so that he had to use his final trump card, the Heaven-Quaking Thunder, to kill him. The Heaven-Quaking Thunder had the terrifying power to threaten a half-step Great Saint. Once a Saint Realm cultivator was hit by it, they would die without a doubt. It was a pity that a peerless genius with excellent talent had died just like that. While Tianlingzi felt regret, he also felt a sense of pleasure all over his body. If the other party didn't agree to his conditions, only death would await them. The explosion lasted for dozens of breaths before it gradually quieted down. When the dust had settled, the palace at the top of Heaven's Spirit Mountain had been reduced to ruins. A huge crater had appeared on the ground. It was at least a few hundred meters wide, and it was a shocking sight. However, Tianlingzi froze. He couldn't move his eyes away. Instead, he stared blankly at the huge crater, where a figure stood. The figure was dyed with a golden halo, as if a flame was burning. The sword in his hand was filled with a pitch-black sharpness. The astonishing aura was like sword chi, pointing straight at the sky and tearing the void. Jiandi, under the power of the Heaven-Quaking Thunder, he didn't die. Could it be that he was a half-step Great Saint? Impossible. According to the previous news, although this Jiandi defeated Tianjianzi, it wasn't easy. He only had a slight upper hand. In less than a year, no matter how much his strength improved, it was impossible for him to become a half-step Great Saint. How could the Heaven-Quaking Thunder not kill him? And it seemed that he was still intact. But in fact, the explosion at that moment made Chen Zong smell the scent of death. He had almost been killed by the explosion. Fortunately, at the critical moment, he had unleashed all of his strength and displayed the Yin and Yang sword realm to the extreme. In addition, he had activated the power of the unbreakable gilded body, causing all of his defenses to reach the extreme. Only then was he able to barely withstand this terrifying explosion. Even so, he still suffered some injuries. It was not visible from the outside because it was an internal injury. In fact, if he had cultivated the formless sky wind movement art to the perfection stage, he would have been able to transform into a sky wind and escape at the moment of explosion. However, there were no ifs. The formless sky wind was a 10th grade secret art, a secondary divine ability. Cultivating it was originally not that easy. Chen Zong's eyes were filled with murderous intent. Just a little bit more and he would have died right here. And the main culprit was Tianlingzi. Tianlingzi had been targeting her ever since she refused to agree to Tianlingzi's conditions. He deserved to die. Chen Zong stopped talking nonsense and didn't hide his killing intent. Stop. I'll give you the soul-dissolving stone and promise to forge a royal god weapon for you. Tianlingzi realized that the crisis of death was approaching. Her face suddenly changed and she shouted for compromise. Unfortunately, it was too late. If she had known this would happen, she wouldn't have done it in the first place. In the face of Tianlingzi's compromise, Chen Zong acted as if he hadn't heard her. He raised the sunken knight's sword without hesitation and attacked with it. Tianlingzi's strength was not bad, but compared with Chen Zong, there was a huge gap. Although this attack was not a unique skill, it was not something that Tianlingzi could resist. The pitch-black sword light, with an extreme murderous intent, broke through the air in an instant without any hesitation. Tianlingzi was horrified. Stop. If you kill me, you won't have a good end. These were Tianlingzi's last words. The sword light broke through the air. Suddenly, Tianlingzi was penetrated by the sword, and her vitality was extinguished in an instant. After killing Tianlingzi, Chen Zong immediately took her storage ring and quickly checked it. There were many things in Tianlingzi's storage ring, most of which were casting materials. Chen Zong found 2 black stones, which seemed to be filled with a trace of divine thought. At first glance, Chen Zong recognized them. They were soul-dissolving stones. These 2 black stones, which were the size of a baby's fist, were the soul-dissolving stones that he had been looking for. They were important materials for royal god weapons and were indispensable. Immediately, he put all the valuable things into his storage ring, including the soul-dissolving stones, and threw away Tianlingzi's storage ring. Next, Chen Zong circulated the mysterious ancient flame refining art and made a grabbing motion in the air. He directly grabbed a ball of incomparably scarlet flames from Tianlingzi's body. This was a type of heavenly flame. He swiftly sealed it. Without hesitation, Chen Zong immediately used the formless sky wind body technique and turned into a gust of sky wind to quickly leave the top of Tianling Mountain. Killing Tianlingzi was no small matter. Next, he might be hunted down by experts, so it was better to leave first. It would be safer to leave the Upper Yuan realm and enter the Profound realm. At the moment of Tianlingzi's death, in another city far away, at the top level of the Myriad Spirit Pavilion, there was suddenly a tyrannical fluctuation. The breath was faintly angry, as if they had encountered something infuriating. An old man opened his eyes in the darkness, emitting a terrifying cold light, which tore the darkness apart like cold lightning. Tianlingzi, you're actually dead. Just who killed you? A slightly aged voice rang out from the darkness, but it contained incomparable power. Soon, the order was issued, and the Myriad Spirit Pavilion immediately operated to inquire about the news clearly. Tianlingzi, I have told you long ago that you need to change your character. Otherwise, you will suffer losses sooner or later. Now that day has come, and the price you have to pay is your life. But as your elder brother, I will avenge you. No matter where the person who killed you escapes, I will kill him as a sacrifice to you. As the voice fell, it fell into darkness and silence again, and the figure disappeared. In the vast sky, a black light flashed by at an astonishing speed and disappeared into the distance in an instant. In the black light was an old man in a black robe. His eyes were dark and deep, filled with extremely cold light and killing intent. This old man was an elder with real power in the Myriad Spirit Pavilion. He was a half-step great saint expert and Tianlingzi's elder brother. It was also because of this old man that Tianlingzi was able to obtain the soul-dissolving stone from the Myriad Spirit Pavilion twice in a row to target Chen Zong. The Myriad Spirit Pavilion was well informed, and Tianlingzi already knew where Chen Zong was going. He was planning to leave the Upper Yuan realm, and his route should be to the Profound world. How could it be? Tianlingzi was a half-step great saint expert, and his strength was not bad among the half-step great saints. When he went all out, his speed was extremely shocking. In an instant, Tian Mingzi crossed tens of thousands of meters and chased in the direction of Chenzong. This feeling, Chenzong, who was quickly leaving Tianling Mountain, suddenly stopped in midair and looked back. There were white clouds drifting endlessly, and there was no one in sight. However, Chenzong instinctively felt a terrible threat approaching quickly. Now, with his own strength, only a half-step great saint expert could bring him such a sense of threat. A half-step great saint expert was extremely fast, and he estimated that it would be difficult for him to escape. In that case, let's fight. For a moment, Chenzong's heart was filled with an amazing fighting spirit. The fighting spirit soared into the sky, as if it was going to tear the void apart. His strength was constantly improving. Although he was still in the Saint Realm, Chenzong felt that there should be no one in the Saint Realm who could be his opponent. Then, how was his current strength compared to a half-step great saint expert? How much was the difference? Perhaps he would know in this battle. As for life and death, Chenzong took it very seriously, but he also saw it clearly. He was quite confident that he could survive under the hands of a half-step great saint expert, even if he was no match for him. What's more, he still had the Azura doppelganger. Now, the Azura doppelganger's strength was extremely tyrannical, and the power of the evil eye of obliteration was extremely terrifying. It was enough to injure an ordinary half-step great saint expert. With something to rely on, there was nothing to fear. Wait. Adjust his breathing. Wait for the half-step great saint expert to arrive, and adjust his essence, qi, and spirit to the peak to prepare for the next battle. Tian Mingzi's speed was extremely fast. From afar, he saw Chenzong's figure and immediately recognized him. This was because he had found a very clear image of Chenzong in the Myriad Spirit Pavilion. He didn't run away. Tian Mingzi was secretly surprised, but he didn't pay much attention to it. His heart was filled with killing intent. Although he had always felt that his younger brother, Tian Lingzi, had a bad temperament and offended people easily, and that one day he might pay the price for offending others, he didn't expect that the price would be so heavy. After all, Tian Lingzi was a grandmaster blacksmith. His identity was extraordinary, and he had the protection of his elder brother. In the entire Upper Yuan realm, as long as he didn't provoke a great saint expert, his life would generally not be in danger. But this time, he paid the price with his life. The killer was a Saint Realm expert. What gave you the courage to kill Tian Lingzi? Tian Mingzi's eyes were filled with fierce killing intent. It pierced through the void and approached Chenzong, as if he wanted to pierce through Chenzong. Tian Lingzi targeted me again, and even wanted to kill me. It's not surprising that I killed him, Chenzong replied calmly. Chenzong replied unhurriedly. His essence, qi and spirit had already been adjusted to the peak. In the face of the oppression emitted by a half-step great sage expert, his essence, qi and spirit vaguely seemed to want to break through their own limits and ascend to a higher level. If that's the case, then die. Tian Mingzi didn't say much. An extremely tyrannical aura erupted in an instant, like a volcanic eruption. It also seemed like the sky was falling and the earth was cracking. The instantaneous power caused the surrounding void to vibrate and shake, faintly shattering. Traces of black quickly spread out with Tian Mingzi as the center. It was like thick ink dripping into water, quickly dyeing the water black. It was as if darkness had descended. A ghastly and terrifying aura spread out and covered the surroundings, including Chenzong's body. In just an instant, Chenzong was covered by the darkness, as if he was about to be devoured. Chapter 1654. Darkness spread in all directions, shrouding the void and blotting out the sun. Chenzong was also engulfed by the darkness, as if he was being devoured. An astonishing pressure assaulted Chen Zong from all directions, as if it wanted to seep into his body and wreak havoc. Chen Zong circulated the Taichu sword origin technique, and the tyrannical power instantly resisted the invading energy. At the same time, he circulated the ancient flame refining technique, and quickly used the purple blaze to firmly protect himself from the corrosion of the dark and cold aura. Tian Mingzi was slightly surprised. A mere 8th-level Saint Rudiment stage cultivator was actually able to resist the corrosion of his aura. Jiandi. This person was the current generation's Jiandi, who was recognized by the Monarch Pagoda and the will of heaven and earth. He was the #1 peerless genius on the 9-colored Monarch tablet. But no matter how extraordinary he was, he would fall at Tian Mingzi's hands today as a sacrifice for his late brother, Tian Lingzi. An incomparably intense killing intent shot out from the depths of Tian Mingzi's eyes as he thrust out his palm. His palm instantly expanded to more than 10 times its original size. Incomparably astonishing black light filled the air as it blasted out in all directions. This palm seemed to completely suppress the surrounding space. Chen Zong felt like he was about to suffocate. It was as if he had become a caged bird under this palm, unable to dodge at all. He could only take it head-on. The sunken knight's sword was unsheathed and a pitch-black sword light instantly streaked across the sky, as if it was cutting through the void. Its power was extremely shocking, and Tian Mingzi did not hold back. Kill. As soon as the sword light and the palm print came into contact, the palm print burst forth with endless power, instantly shattering the sword light and mercilessly bombarding Chen Zong. Chen Zong's expression was solemn as he immediately performed a series of sword moves. The sword light was endless, overlapping and crisscrossing. It seemed extremely complicated, but it was also extremely exquisite. It constantly swept past the giant palm print, trying to weaken and defeat it. However, the palm print's power was extremely condensed, and for a moment, Chen Zong found that the series of sword moves could not do anything to it. He could not weaken it at all. Dual forms sword realm. The sword light split into black and white, forming a realm of its own that firmly protected Tian Mingzi. Boom! The palm strike carried an extremely terrifying might as it struck the dual polarity sword realm. The dual polarity sword realm, which had been unshakable in the past, shook violently at this moment. An extremely terrifying force caused the dual polarity sword realm to stop in an instant, almost unable to operate. Soon after, an extremely powerful force continuously passed through the yin and yang sword realm and bombarded him. Resist. Defend with all your might. Chen Zong was shocked to find that the yin and yang sword realm was unable to withstand his opponent's palm strike. It paused for a moment and weakened part of its power. Instantly, cracks appeared on the realm and it shattered. The yin and yang sword realm had lost its effectiveness. Unbreakable golden body. Without hesitation, Chen Zong immediately ignited the power of the Lingwu to strengthen his body refinement cultivation. At the same time, he activated the unbreakable golden body with all his strength. Golden light burned like flames and covered his entire body, causing his defense to instantly increase to an extremely shocking level. Chen Zong felt as if he had been directly hit by an ancient giant beast. The incomparably terrifying power was completely unleashed on his body. His bones were unable to bear the heavy burden, and they seemed to be on the verge of shattering. The golden light on his body flickered incessantly, dimming and flickering as if it would collapse at any time. Strong. The power of that palm strike was extremely powerful. It was so powerful that his yin and yang sword realm could not withstand it. Even his unbreakable golden body was almost broken. Retreat. Chen Zong could only retreat quickly to disperse the terrifying power of that strike. The gap between them was too great. Sure enough, he could not fight against a half-step great saint expert. The gap between the saint realm and him was too great. Little did he know that Tian Mingzi was even more shocked. The palm strike just now seemed very simple, but in fact it contained 100% of his strength. Moreover, it was a powerful martial technique. He had thought that it would be able to destroy his opponent as easily as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. He had not expected that his opponent would be able to withstand it. Since when could a Saint Realm expert be so powerful? Since ancient times, even when Emperor Lingwu was young, he had only been able to fight against an ordinary half-step Great Saint expert when he was at the peak of the Saint Realm. Tianmingzi knew very well that he was not at the top of the half-step Great Saint level, but he was not at the bottom either. He belonged to the middle level. Such strength was enough to defeat any Saint Realm expert, regardless of whether they were supreme geniuses or peerless geniuses. However, this young man was able to block an attack with 100% of his strength. It was truly shocking. One should know that his opponent's cultivation was only at the 8th level Saint Realm. If he was promoted to the peak of the 9th level Saint Realm, his strength would definitely increase greatly. At that time, he might really have the strength to fight against an ordinary half-step Great Saint expert. If he became a half-step Great Saint expert, he might be able to reach the top level in one leap. However, it was too late to say anything. Today, he would die by his own hand. Kill. Since he could not kill him with one strike, he would use a second strike. In the blink of an eye, Tianmingzi formed a seal with both hands. A huge palm print condensed like a mountain and appeared in the sky. An endless black aura spread out, exuding an incomparably terrifying pressure. It was as if it was suppressing the four extremes of the world, freezing the void. Chen Zong's body trembled slightly. It was as if he was being suppressed in the void. An endless pressure was pouring down on him. It felt as if he had turned into a small fish and the water around him had turned into ice. He could not move. The black mountain that appeared in the sky seemed to be only a dozen meters in size. It was not big, but it was extremely solid. It was as if it had condensed into a solid substance and was made of some kind of divine gold. It was indestructible. Its aura was unparalleled. It suppressed the sky, causing the space and time to freeze. It was unparalleled. Under this attack, Chen Zong felt that he would die. With his current strength, he could not resist at all. Once he landed, he would be killed instantly. At this point, the Azura doppelganger could no longer hide. The space between his brows flashed, and then a wisp of chaotic gray light instantly bloomed. It was suffused with a wisp of indescribable extreme sharpness. The sharpness seemed to be able to destroy everything and extinguish all life. Nothing in the world could resist it at all. The Azura doppelganger, Chen Xiu, had arrived. As soon as Chen Xiu appeared, he immediately rushed up and swung the Nirvana evil sword. He burst forth with all his strength to display his strongest sword move. The sword light was like a chaotic azure dragon soaring in the sky. It let out an earth-shattering roar that seemed to be able to shatter the heavens. With the supply of sufficient evil aura, the Azura doppelganger's cultivation had reached the late 9th heaven Saint Realm. His energy was incomparably pure. The heavenly baleful Tao intent had also evolved into a top-grade Tao intent. It was infinitely close to the extreme realm. The sword attack was like a chaotic azure dragon tearing through space. Its power was much stronger than the line of heaven and earth. In an instant, the aura that sealed the void was broken. Chen Zong returned to normal. He raised his sword and endless sword chi, sword light gathered and merged into the sword. The line of heaven and earth. Chen Zong unleashed all his strength and slashed out towards Tianmingzi. The appearance of the Azura doppelganger was completely beyond Tianmingzi's expectations. Moreover, the fact that the Azura doppelganger could break through the dark heaven seal's seal shocked him even more. Tianmingzi's pupils shrank to the size of needles when he saw the hair-like pitch-black sword light piercing through the air. This sword actually caused him to feel a trace of threat. It was incredible that a trivial Saint Realm cultivator could make him feel threatened. Soon after, Tianmingzi's finger was like a sword as he dragged it through the air, drawing a black trajectory in the air. Soon after, he slashed out with his finger. Suddenly, a wisp of black finger force broke through the air and filled the air with an astonishing chill. The surrounding darkness spread in all directions and permeated the void. The line of heaven and earth sword light collided with the black finger force. After a slight pause, it was directly shattered by the black finger force. The power of the line of heaven and earth was indeed very strong, but Chenzong's cultivation was still too low. If he had the cultivation of an ordinary half-step great saint, this sword attack might have been able to defeat his opponent's finger force. There were no ifs. His opponent's cultivation was indeed very strong. In this regard, there was an essential gap between them. As the dark heaven seal fell, Chen Xiu tried his best to resist but was still defeated. Although Chen Xiu's strength was very strong, he still could not resist a half-step great saint master head-on. However, this also bought him some time. Chen Zong and Chen Xiu immediately broke free from the heaven netherworld seal. The void was suppressed and the ground was shattered. A 1,000-meter-long hole appeared. It was a shocking sight. Chen Zong and Chen Xiu immediately rushed towards Tianmingzi from the left and right. Escape. It was simply impossible. Then, the only way was for Chen Xiu to stay and delay his opponent so that his real body could escape. However, Chen Zong would not do so. Chen Xiu's potential was infinite, and his soul was one with his. He should not die just like that. In this case, his real body and avatar would join forces to fight the enemy. Moreover, Chen Xiu also had a great killing weapon. That killing weapon had once injured the demigod-level evil void devil. Chen Xiu's cultivation was not as strong as it was now. With Chen Xiu's current cultivation, if he used the evil eye of obliteration again, its power would certainly be more powerful. Because he had something to rely on, he was fearless. Chen Zong was in such a state at this moment. Although he was not his opponent's match, he was not completely defenseless against the joint forces of his real body and avatar. Chen Zong also wanted to test his limit. This was a strong enemy, a rare strong enemy. Usually, Chen Zong would not take the initiative to provoke a half-step great saint master. Now it was just the right time. He could use the pressure of such a strong enemy to suppress himself and stimulate his potential, so that he could make more progress. The path of cultivation had never been peaceful. If he wanted to make progress, he could only use stronger external pressure to suppress himself and stimulate his potential. Of course, if he did not have enough potential, this method would be ineffective. On the contrary, it would damage his foundation. However, Chen Zong believed that his potential was very sufficient, and there were still many things that had not been unearthed. Fight. Their fighting spirits soared into the sky as they charged forward fearlessly. This immediately infuriated Tianmingzi. At the same time, Tianmingzi was also very surprised. It seemed that other than their robes, swords, and auras, their appearances and figures were exactly the same. It was as if they were made from the same mold. Chapter 1655. Darkness filled the void, blotting out the sky and covering the earth, completely shrouding the earth. Chen Zong and Chen Xiu shuttled through the darkness, holding their swords. Tianmingzi's arms shook, and a terrifying qi burst out in an instant. It was like a hurricane, raging endlessly, repelling and shaking everything. Hand over your doppelganger's secret technique or secret treasure, and I'll spare your life. Tianmingzi's voice also sounded, entering Chen Zong and Chen Xiu's ears. After all, Tianmingzi was a half-step great saint expert and an elder with real power in the myriad spirit pavilion. He knew more than most half-step great saint. Therefore, there were only two explanations. One was that Chen Zong had a special secret treasure that could breed a doppelganger. The other was that Chen Zong had a doppelganger secret technique that could create a doppelganger. Whether it was the first or the second, in short, he had an extra doppelganger. Moreover, the doppelganger was very strong, and seemed to be more tyrannical than the original body. Of course, Tian Mingzi was now somewhat unsure which was the original body and which was the doppelganger. However, no matter what, it was extraordinary. If he could get it, he would definitely become more powerful. Chen Zong and Chen Xiu's hearts sank slightly. The thing they were most worried about had finally happened. All along, the reason why Chen Zong did not show the Azura doppelganger in front of others was that he did not want others to see it and covet it. Now that he was facing Tian Mingzi, a half-step great saint expert, whose strength was too tyrannical, the original body was no match for him at all. There was no way he could resist at all. As a last resort, he could only reveal the Azura doppelganger. Compared to revealing the secret, preserving his life was more important. Moreover, as long as he killed the other party, the secret would remain a secret. Killing intent condensed in Chen Zong and Chen Xiu's hearts, becoming more and more solid and powerful. They unleashed all their strength without holding back. Kill. Every sword was condensed with the ultimate killing intent. The original body and doppelganger's sword techniques were different. His main body's sword Dao was a supreme sword Dao that was all-encompassing, while his clone's sword Dao was an extremely pure sword Dao of slaughter, as if it was born only for slaughter. Any Dao that reached the pinnacle would possess unparalleled power. But as of now, the Azura killing sword Dao of the doppelganger was clearly stronger. However, the supreme sword Dao of the original body had boundless potential. The further one progressed, the stronger it would become. Tian Mingzi had experienced countless battles and was knowledgeable. Even he was shocked by Chen Zong and Chen Xiu's swordsmanship. Very strong. Very clever. As expected of the current generation of Jiandi, he had limitless potential and a bright future ahead of him. The more this was the case, the more determined Tian Mingzi's killing intent was. Not only was it to avenge Tian Mingzi's death, but it was also to get rid of future troubles. Otherwise, if such a monstrous genius were to escape, he would definitely become even more powerful and terrifying in the future, and would not be a match for him. Now was the time to get rid of him. As for the doppelganger secret technique or doppelganger artifact, he would find it from his opponent's corpse. Even if he could not find it in the end, he had to get rid of him. Tian Mingzi's attacks became more and more ruthless. The power of each of his moves became more and more astonishing. Black light swept out, and a chill spread in all directions. Chen Zong and Chen Xiu formed a mysterious god-killing formation to further increase their strength. Even though it was 2 against 1, they were still barely able to fight back and were at a disadvantage. They were in a perilous situation and were almost injured or even killed. However, Chen Zong and Chen Xiu resisted this terrible pressure and continued to resist. They pushed their movement skills to the extreme, and also pushed their swordsmanship to the extreme. The strength of a half-step Great Saint Realm Master was really terrifying. Whether it was himself or his doppelganger, their strength was already extremely strong in the Saint Realm. It was difficult to find an opponent, but in the face of a half-step Great Saint Realm Master, even with the mysterious god-killing array formed by his doppelganger and Chen Xiu, he still felt an extremely strong pressure invading him and his doppelganger. If it were other Saint Realm Masters, such as Tian Jianzi, they would find it difficult to move under such pressure, let alone resist. The gap. It was too big. However, Chen Zong also felt that something seemed to be exploding in the deepest part of his body, as if some kind of power was being shaken and stimulated. It was his potential, the potential hidden in the depths of his body that was being stimulated little by little. However, the pressure was too strong. The burden on Chen Zong and Chen Xiu was also getting stronger and stronger. It was unknown how long they could last. However, Whether it was his doppelganger or his doppelganger, their will was extremely tenacious. As long as there was still a glimmer of hope, they would not give up and would definitely persist until the end. The pressure was constantly accumulating and growing stronger, like an invisible mountain that was constantly increasing in weight. It made his doppelganger and Chen Xiu feel like they were about to collapse. This kind of collapse was not only on their minds but also on their bodies. The more they fought, the more surprised and fearful Tian Mingzi became. This boy is too terrifying. Sensational. If someone had told him before that a Saint Realm Master could compete with him, he would have definitely slapped them to death, but now the truth was right in front of him, and he was experiencing it himself. Erupt! Tian Mingzi's aura became more and more tyrannical and terrifying to the extreme. Chen Zong and Chen Xiu only felt as if a world-destroying storm had suddenly swept over them, causing their bodies and minds to collapse. They couldn't hold on any longer, they had already reached their limit. If they continued to persist, not only would it not bring them any benefits, on the contrary, it would cause irreparable damage to their foundations. Retreat! When Tian Mingzi saw Chen Zong and Chen Xiu both retreat, he immediately understood that they could not hold on any longer. In that case, he would kill one of them first. Dark Heaven Seal. The Dark Heaven Seal that was unleashed was 30% more powerful than before. It was even more terrifying. Chen Xiu slashed out with all his strength, like a chaotic azure dragon rushing out of the abyss, his aura roaring as gray arcs of lightning circled around his body, seemingly capable of destroying all life. Chen Xiu's all-out attack was unable to resist the Dark Heaven Seal like before, and in an instant, it was directly suppressed and defeated. The Dark Heaven Seal fell like a hot knife through butter, and without any hesitation, the void was once again suppressed, making it difficult for Chen Zong and Chen Xiu to move. Are we going to die? Tian Mingzi's eyes also flashed with unparalleled ferocity and viciousness. Finally, he was going to avenge his brother. Finally, he was going to get rid of a troublemaker. Kill! Pressing his hands against the void, the ancient black mountain-like Dark Heaven Seal fell at an even faster speed, bringing with it an even more astonishing and terrifying pressure. Suppress! Kill! If this attack landed completely, Chen Zong and Chen Xiu would probably be torn apart in an instant. Even their souls wouldn't be able to survive, and they would be destroyed without leaving behind a corpse. However, even so, Chen Zong and Chen Xiu were not the least bit afraid, because they still had something to rely on. Without any hesitation, Chen Xiu burst out with an extremely shocking aura, as if all the evil spirits in the world had emerged, as if they had come from the endless void like a tidal wave, immediately filling the sky and tearing the darkness apart, causing Tian Mingzi to involuntarily tighten his body and feel a chill all over his body. It seemed that something terrible was about to happen. Without any time to think, Chen Xiu's eyes were suddenly covered by a pitch-black darkness, so deep that it was like the abyss of hell. Immediately, the light burst out and shot directly at the Dark Heaven Seal falling from the sky, with unparalleled power, causing the Dark Heaven Seal to tremble slightly, but it fell again. However, the black light condensed into a black wheel, and as it continued to spin, it grew bigger and bigger, until it was the same size as the Dark Heaven Seal. As it spun, not only did it block the falling momentum of the Dark Heaven Seal, but it also dissolved the extremely terrifying pressure, allowing Chen Zong and Chen Xiu to regain their ability to move. Cracking sounds suddenly rang out, and in front of Tian Mingzi's shocked eyes, a crack appeared on the Dark Heaven Seal that he had unleashed with all his strength. Then, like a torrent bursting through a dam, the entire Dark Heaven Seal began to shatter. After the huge black wheel crushed the Dark Heaven Seal, it did not stop, but came crushing down from the sky. The extremely terrifying pressure seemed to be able to destroy everything, and there was an indescribable evil and pressure, causing Tian Mingzi's body to tremble, and a chill to sweep over him. Danger! Incomparably dangerous! Tian Mingzi had experienced countless battles, and his instinctive reaction was extremely shocking. In an instant, he did not hesitate and immediately retreated. He felt that if he was hit by the huge black wheel, he would definitely be injured. However, the huge wheel had locked onto Tian Mingzi, and there was a feeling that no matter where Tian Mingzi ran, he would not be able to escape. In that case, he would shatter it. His power erupted once again, and the black light around Tian Mingzi's body was extremely strong. This was a blow that he had unleashed with all his strength. He formed a seal with both hands and unleashed the Dark Heaven Seal again. This time, the Dark Heaven Seal was not only unleashed with all his strength, but also used a power that exceeded his body's capacity, causing some damage to himself. But he had to do so, otherwise, he would not be able to withstand it. Boom! It was earth-shattering. Under the incomparably shocking collision, an extremely terrifying power burst forth. It was as if the heavens and the earth were falling apart. A void storm swept out in all directions, destroying everything in its path. It was as if the sea was collapsing and destroying the world. Under the earth-shattering explosion, the evil wheel of Nirvana shattered, and so did the Dark Heaven Seal. Tian Mingzi bore the brunt of it, and with a heavy muffled groan, Tian Mingzi instantly turned into a black streamer and retreated at an astonishing speed. Under the impact of such power, even with his strength of a half-step great saint, he could not withstand it. He was directly injured, and it was not light. He had to escape and heal his injuries, otherwise the consequences would be very serious. As for Chen Zong, he could no longer care about him, because he felt a terrible power raging in his body, trying to destroy his body and extinguish his vitality. If he did not eliminate it in time, there would be serious consequences. Suddenly, a hair-like black sword light with a blood-red color slashed down from the side. Heaven and earth were aligned. This sword seemed to have been calculated, as if it had been waiting for him there. His hair stood on end. The sword light slashed down, and with a scream, an arm was sent flying high. The black light eventually escaped, and its speed was so fast that Chen Zong could not chase after it. He could only watch it leave, and it disappeared from his sight. It escaped. Chapter 1656. I'm bringing my wife and children back to my hometown for the new year. I wish all my junior brothers and sisters a happy new year in advance. Please take care of your health. Chen Xiu's face was pale. He had used the evil eye of obliteration at full force just now, and it had nearly exhausted all his strength. He felt as if his body had been emptied. This was also the reason why Chen Xiu was unwilling to use the evil eye of obliteration so quickly. Every time he used it, it consumed too much strength. Of course, he could control the output of his strength, but if he didn't have enough strength, the evil eye of obliteration wouldn't be powerful enough to defeat a half-step Great Saint expert. If it wasn't a half-step Great Saint expert, there was no need to use the evil eye of obliteration at all. Chen Xiu's strength was enough to defeat them. Chen Zong glanced in the direction Tian Mingzi had left, then immediately turned and flew towards the profound world. The thing he was most worried about had happened, but since it had happened, there was no need to regret it. However, Chen Zong knew that he might have to face more powerful enemies in the future. It was a pity that the sword strike didn't kill Tian Mingzi, otherwise there wouldn't be any future troubles. However, it also showed the strength of a half-step Great Saint expert. Strength! Chen Zong thought to himself, and his eyes flashed like cold lightning. The most important thing is strength. As long as I have enough strength, all threats are no longer threat. Although this battle was very dangerous, and I almost died, it also stimulated my potential. Immediately, Chen Zong quickly descended into the mountain and found a remote place to open a temporary cave. He planned to break through there. It wasn't easy to raise one's body refining cultivation because of the lack of sufficient resources. On the other hand, it was relatively easier to cultivate qi. He took out a large number of heavenly origin pills and absorbed them into his body. Like a whale sucking in water, a large amount of pure energy surged endlessly in his body, vast and boundless. The 30th stage of the origin sword art circulated at full force, quickly refining and absorbing the energy. It was like a torrent of thousands of waves, unceasingly crashing and breaking through the barrier. Breakthrough. 8th Heaven Saint Realm Midstage. Suddenly, Chernzong's aura became stronger. Sure enough, in a life-and-death battle with a strong enemy, under the pressure of a life-and-death crisis, one could better stimulate one's potential, thus allowing one's cultivation to break through faster. After the breakthrough, Chernzong slowly adjusted his breath and stabilized his cultivation. He didn't stop cultivating until his cultivation was completely stabilized. Then, a red ball appeared in Chernzong's hand. It was a sealed flame, burning fiercely. It was Tianlingzi's strange fire of heaven, which was now obtained by Chernzong. Chernzong planned to refine and devour this heavenly flame to increase the power of his purple blaze of devastation. The Purple Horizon incineration flame's improvement was slow. After all these years, it had only risen from the 4th grade to the 5th grade. Although it was powerful enough to threaten or even kill an ordinary 6th Heaven Saint Rudiment stage cultivator, it was still too much for Chernzong. The heavenly flame's improvement could only be achieved gradually over a long period of time. If it wanted to improve quickly, it could only devour other heaven and earth unique forces. Chernzong carefully sensed the heavenly flame of Tianlingzi, but he couldn't figure out what kind of heavenly flame it was. This was because the heavenly flame contained two completely different auras. Obviously, it was formed by the fusion of two heavenly flames. One of the characteristics of the heavenly extraordinary flame was its extremely high temperature. It was extremely high, enough to burn and melt everything. The other characteristic was its purification, which was similar to one of the characteristics of the purple expanse incineration flames. After all, this was the flame that Tianlingzi used to forge, so these two characteristics were very suitable. In addition, Chernzong could also sense that the heavenly flame's grade had reached the 7th grade. The power of a 7th grade heavenly flame combined with a heavenly flame was enough to threaten an ordinary 8th Heaven Saint Rudiment stage cultivator. If the Purple Horizon incineration flame could devour and fuse it, it could definitely improve to the 7th grade or even the 8th grade. Its power would greatly increase. Under normal circumstances, the 5th grade Purple Horizon incineration flame would not be able to fuse with the heavenly flame. It would even be devoured by the heavenly flame. However, with Chernzong's strength and the ancient fire refining technique, devouring the heavenly flame was not a problem. Devour. The ancient fire refining technique was fully activated, and the Purple Horizon incineration flame's power was stimulated to the extreme. It instantly enveloped the heavenly flame. In an instant, the crimson heavenly flame released a shocking power, attempting to tear the Purple Horizon incineration flame apart and devour it. However, it was directly suppressed by Chernzong's strength. Chernzong's strength had broken through to the intermediate 8th Heaven Saint Rudiment stage. Due to his cultivation technique, he was even stronger than an ordinary 9th Heaven Saint Rudiment stage cultivator. It was not difficult for him to suppress a 7th grade heavenly flame. Under the suppression, the heavenly flame could not move. It could only be slowly devoured by the Purple Horizon incineration flame, causing the Purple Horizon incineration flame's aura to gradually grow stronger. Breakthrough. The Purple Horizon incineration flame's aura suddenly soared and reached the 6th grade. It became a 6th grade heavenly flame, and the speed at which it devoured the crimson heavenly flame became faster. As time passed, the crimson heavenly flame grew weaker, while the Purple Horizon incineration flame's aura grew stronger. 7th grade. Limit of the 7th grade. The crimson heavenly flame only had a little bit of energy left. Devour. Merge. Breakthrough. 8th grade. When the purple horizon incineration flame completely devoured and merged with the crimson heavenly flame, it finally broke through again and reached the 8th grade. Although it was not stable enough, as long as Chunzong continued to circulate the ancient fire refining technique, its temperature would gradually decrease as time passed. After merging with the crimson heavenly flame, the purple horizon incineration flame's power had further increased. It was enough to threaten an ordinary 9th Heaven Saint Rudiment stage cultivator, and it could even kill them if it caught them off guard. In this way, the purple horizon incineration flame could once again become a real help to Chunzong and increase its power. His strength had further increased. If he intercepted Tian Mingzi with his current strength, even if he could not kill him, he would inevitably cause more serious injuries. However, after cutting off one of Tian Mingzi's arms, coupled with the erosion of the evil eye of obliteration's power, Tian Mingzi would not be able to find trouble with him for a while. The only thing he had to pay attention to was whether Tian Mingzi would use Myriad Spirit Pavilion to deal with him. Although he was an elder with real power in Myriad Spirit Pavilion, as a Chamber of Commerce, Myriad Spirit Pavilion had always been neutral and would not be easily mobilized to deal with anyone. However, if Tian Mingzi really wanted to go all out, he would spread the news and let others find Chunzong. With both his cultivation and the heavenly flame having broken through, Chunzong found it difficult to improve in other aspects for a while, so he came out of seclusion and quickly flew in the direction of the profound world. While using the heavenly wind formless movement technique, Yang Kai quietly comprehended its mysteries and strove to reach perfection as soon as possible. Great accomplishment and perfection seemed to be only one level apart, but there was a huge difference. Great accomplishment represented proficiency and mastery, while perfection represented complete mastery and complete mastery without any flaws. If the heavenly wind formless movement technique had reached perfection, Chunzong would have been able to dodge many attacks with his movement technique and would not have needed to take them head-on. However, it was not easy to reach perfection in a 10th grade secret art. Even many half-step great saint experts had not been able to do so. In terms of martial arts realm, Chunzong had actually surpassed many half-step great saint experts. With the breakthrough in his cultivation, Chunzong's movement technique was much faster. Like a gust of wind sweeping across the sky, he disappeared into the distance in an instant. Tian Mingzi fled in a panic, running at full speed without holding back, constantly taking out pills and stuffing them into his mouth. The power of the evil eye of obliteration was raging in his body. One of his arms had been cut off, and the sword qi had invaded his body. The internal and external injuries made him extremely uncomfortable. Tian Mingzi's face was pale and cold. He could not believe that he had been so severely injured. The murderous intent in his heart was about to erupt like a volcano. It was not easy to regrow an arm that had been cut off. He would have to pay a huge price. If his arm did not recover, the loss of an arm would have a significant impact on his strength. It would be enough to drop him from the not-so-weak half-step Great Saint level to the average half-step Great Saint level. Damn it! That Jiandi really deserved to die. Not only did he have to avenge Tianlingzi, but he also had to avenge his severed arm. Even if I can't deal with you personally, don't think you'll have an easy time, Tian Mingzi said fiercely. He had to stabilize his injuries first, dispel the evil and brutal power raging in his body, and then return to the Myriad Spirit Pavilion to spread the news. He believed that a group of experts would be very interested in the secret art of cloning or the secret treasure of cloning. He could deal with one half-step Great Saint, but could he deal with two half-step Great Saints? With the information channels of the Myriad Spirit Pavilion, the news could spread throughout the Upper Yuan realm in an extremely short period of time. It could even spread to the surrounding realms. When the time came, many experts would naturally be dispatched to search for Chen Zong. Even if they could not kill him, they would not let him live in peace. The profound origin realm and the upper Yuan realm were separated by the sunken bone abyss, and the natural moat between the upper Yuan realm and the profound origin realm was a vast ocean full of danger. The bewildering light ocean. The bewildering light ocean was also left behind from the ancient war. It was shattered by a tyrannical force, forming an ocean filled with endless fog and light. It would make people dizzy, and it was easy to get lost in it, unable to find the way out. Moreover, the bewildering light ocean was very large, and contained a strange power that would cause people to unknowingly deviate from their direction while flying. In the end, they might be wandering in the bewildering light ocean for a long time before they could escape. Even if a half-step great saint expert entered the bewildering light ocean, without guidance, they would be lost for a long time, wasting a lot of time in vain. Moreover, there were dangerous sea beasts and other sea creatures lurking in the bewildering light ocean. It could be said that if one did not have suitable means, it would be difficult to cross the bewildering light ocean unless one was a top half-step great saint expert or a supreme expert in the great saint realm. Although Chen Zong knew that it was difficult for him to find an opponent in the saint realm, he did not dare to cross the bewildering light ocean carelessly. After all, compared to the heavens and earth, humans were too small. Chen Zong was waiting. Someone had specially constructed the sea-crossing bewildering light ship. It was a large-scale treasure. It was a type of treasured ship that was specially used to traverse the sea-crossing bewildering light. However, the materials used to construct it were precious and the difficulty of constructing it was rather high. This bewildering light ocean ship had been going back and forth between the upper Yuan realm and the profound origin realm. Each round trip took a lot of time, ranging from a month to 3 months. Sometimes, if one rested for a period of time, the interval would be even longer. Chapter 1657. The Myriad Spirit Pavilion was a major force in the Upper Yuan realm, but it had always remained neutral. In addition, its nature was business, so it was not included in the ranks of the sect. Ordinary people often didn't know much about it, but those with status or background knew that the Myriad Spirit Pavilion had a deep foundation and many powerhouses, so they couldn't be provoked. Although they remained neutral, it didn't mean that they would remain indifferent and allow others to humiliate them. If they fought back, even some of the powerful sect in the Upper Yuan realm would find it difficult to bear. However, the sect and powerhouses still maintained an attitude of trust towards the Myriad Spirit Pavilion, especially the news they sent out. Doppelganger, secret treasure or secret technique. As the news spread like wildfire, all the sect and powerhouses received the news, and they were all tempted. If they could use a clone that wasn't weak, a clone that wasn't inferior to the main body in terms of strength, it would be a huge temptation. Anyone would be tempted. Jiandi. Just in time, let's go and see what this so-called Jiandi is capable of. Is he invincible in the saint realm? Then what about the half-step great saint realm? Can you resist him? On the Heavenly Sword Mountain, Tian Jianzi and Xiao Tianjian naturally also received the news, and they were immediately stunned. It turns out that he still has a trump card. Tian Jianzi and Xiao Tianjian secretly smiled bitterly. They thought they already knew Jiandi's strength, but they didn't expect that Jiandi still had a rare trump card like a doppelganger. Master, once this news comes out, I'm afraid it won't be peaceful, Xiao Tianjian sighed. After seeing Chen Zong's ability, he suddenly grew a lot. Yes, with Jiandi's strength, he shouldn't be afraid of any Saint Realm powerhouses, but doppelganger secret techniques and secret treasures are also very attractive to half-step Great Saint Realm powerhouses, enough for them to personally search for them, Tian Jianzi whispered with a worried look. In this case, Tian Jianzi couldn't help. After all, if it was just a Saint Realm master, no matter how many of them there were, they wouldn't be able to do anything to Jiandi, so it didn't matter whether he helped or not. However, if a half-step Great Saint Master took action, it would be useless even if he sacrificed his life. After all, his strength was indeed very strong among Saint Realm Masters, but there was a huge gap between him and a half-step Great Saint Master. This was a calamity, and Jiandi could only depend on themselves. What was certain was that if the Sword Emperor could survive this calamity, his reputation would become even stronger. Perhaps his strength would become even stronger as well. Bewildering Light City was located beside the Bewildering Light Ocean and was only about 10 miles away from it. This city was originally built for the Bewildering Light Ocean, hence it was directly named Bewildering Light City. Miguang City was just a small city with almost no ordinary people. After all, the environment here was quite harsh. It was not suitable for ordinary people to live here. Only people with a certain level of cultivation were suitable to live here. Therefore, not only were there no ordinary people in Bewildering Light City, but there were also very few foundation building cultivators. Most of them were at the Transcendent Realm and Saint Realm. Chen Zong was an ordinary person among them. He was just a cultivator waiting for the Bewildering Light Ocean ship like the others. In order to board the Bewildering Light Ocean ship, one had to buy a ticket first. The price of each ticket was not low. 100 Heaven Origin Pills. Chen Zong clearly remembered that when he was abducted to Tian Yuan Sacred Region, Ming Daozi, who was at the 9th Heaven Saint Realm, sold him for only 1 Heaven Origin Pill. It was undeniable that Ming Daozi was poor. Although he was at the 9th Heaven Saint Realm, his cultivation was quite ordinary. Moreover, he had returned to Tian Yuan Sacred Region and did not have much money on him. Therefore, he sold as much as he could. However, the price of 100 Heaven Origin Pills per ticket was indeed high. For Chen Zong, 100 Heaven Origin Pills were nothing. He had killed so many enemies and obtained a lot of spoils. Let alone 100 Heaven Origin Pills, even 1,000 Heaven Origin Pills were nothing to Chen Zong. Of course, for many Saint Realm cultivators, 100 Heaven Origin Pills was still a huge fortune. However, those who wanted to cross the Bewildering Light Ocean and travel between the Upper Yuan Realm and Profound World were generally not weak. After buying the ticket, all Chen Zong had to do was wait. When the Bewildering Light Ocean ship arrived, someone would naturally come to inform them to board. As soon as the time was up, the ship would immediately depart. Usually, they would not be late to wait. Time flew by and half a month had passed. Chen Zong continued to cultivate. Chen Xiu's strength had also completely recovered, but he had not broken through yet. However, with Chen Xiu's 9th Heaven Saint Realm cultivation base, cultivation method level, sword technique, Dao intent, and so on, his strength was only stronger than his main body. In the past few days, Chen Zong's heart had unknowingly filled with a gloomy feeling, as if something bad was about to happen. It was like the gloomy and oppressive feeling before the arrival of a storm. What would come, and he could not avoid it. If he left now, he would not be able to go to the Profound World. After all, there was only one way to go to the Profound World, and that was to board the Bewildering Light Ocean ship. Therefore, Chen Zong did not leave. No matter what danger came, he would face it directly. It was nothing more than a fight to the death. Of course, the best thing was for the Bewildering Light Ocean ship to arrive as soon as possible so that he could board it. According to the rules of the Bewildering Light Ocean ship, after boarding, the people on board were not allowed to attack each other. Similarly, the people outside were also not allowed to attack. Otherwise, it would incur the wrath of the owner of the Bewildering Light Ocean ship. As far as everyone knew, there were 5 half-step Great Saint experts in the possession of the sea-crossing mystifying light. These 5 half-step Great Saint experts would escort the ship every time. What was special was that these 5 half-step Great Saint experts were actually quintuplet. When they joined forces, their strength was even more terrifying and couldn't be provoked. This was also the reason why the price of boarding the bewildering light ocean ship was so high. This was more or less the same as pinning his hopes on others, but the timing was not right, and he did not have the confidence to face so many half-step Great Saint Realm Masters. In the sky, a number of figures flew across the sky at astonishing speed, exuding a terrifying aura. They were all heading towards the bewildering light ocean. These people's eyes were blazing with ambition. They did not come with good intentions, but for the so-called doppelganger secret technique and doppelganger secret treasure in Chern Zong's possession. Before the bewildering light ocean ship could react, a group of half-step Great Saint experts had already arrived at bewildering Light City and quickly found Chern Zong's location. "Little friend, you must be the current Jiendi, right? You have an extraordinary bearing." It was an old man with a kind face, and he was smiling kindly. Those who did not know him would think that he was a very friendly old man, but those who knew him well knew that he was ruthless and his hands were stained with blood. This old man has always liked to exchange pointers and discuss the Tao with peerless geniuses. This time, I specially came to invite you to stay in my small hut for a while, so that you can discuss the Tao with me. On the surface, it was an invitation to discuss the Tao, but in reality, the consequences would be unpredictable. Chern Zong naturally would not agree, because this old man seemed kind, but Chern Zong felt a deep malice from him. "Old too, don't use your disgusting kindness to deceive a young man," a middle-aged man said expressionlessly. Immediately, his eyes swept towards Chern Zong with a trace of extremely sharp cold light, as if wanting to penetrate him. "Jiendi Chern Zong, I'm Wu Zhu, a half-step Great Saint. You should know my purpose very well. Hand it over, and I'll spare your life." A threat. A very direct threat. "The two of you are nothing. That secret technique or secret treasure belongs to me." A burly man who was as strong as an iron tower sneered. The aura that emanated from his body was incomparably heavy, and there was even a metallic chill. "Taigang King, although your ranking on the Great Saint ranking is higher than mine, that's only 100 years ago. Now, you might not be able to defeat me." Wu Zhu frowned slightly and said angrily. "Oh, then you can try. Let's see if I can beat you up." Taigang King's eyes flashed with an iron-blooded brilliance, which was extremely terrifying. His aura was so strong that it directly charged forward. Chern Zong was secretly shocked. Taigang King's aura was even stronger than that of the elder from the myriad spirit pavilion who was chasing after him. As for the Great Saint ranking they were talking about, its full name was the Upper Yuan Great Saint ranking. It was the highest ranking in the Upper Yuan realm. Of course, those listed on it were not Great Saint realm experts. In fact, there were very few Great Saint realm experts, and they almost never fought with each other. Therefore, almost no one knew the strength of the Great Saint realm experts. Naturally, there would not be any ranking. Those listed on the Upper Yuan Great Saint ranking were all half-step Great Saint experts. The reason why the name Great Saint was used as the ranking's name was nothing more than a kind of encouragement. It encouraged half-step Great Saint experts to break through to the Great Saint realm, although the possibility was extremely low. There were only 99 names on the Upper Yuan Great Saint ranking, which represented the 99 most powerful half-step Great Saint experts in the Upper Yuan realm. Tian Mingzi's strength was indeed not bad, but he was not listed on the Upper Yuan Great Saint ranking. The three people in front of him were all listed on the Upper Yuan Great Saint ranking, but their rankings were slightly lower. Obviously, Taigang King's ranking was higher than the other two, which was why he had the confidence to berate them. "Taigang King, let me try." A deep voice suddenly sounded. Immediately, an extremely cold and gloomy aura spread from outside. Chern Zong's body trembled unconsciously. Even his soul felt a chill, as if it was about to be frozen. An expert. Another terrifying expert had arrived. It could be speculated that this person was also listed on the Upper Yuan Great Saint ranking, and his ranking was higher than Taigang King's. Otherwise, he would not have said such words. Yin King. Whether it was Old Devil 2, Wu Zhu, or Taigang King, their expressions changed when they saw the person who had arrived. There was an indescribable solemnity. Half-Step Great Saint was just a title, but there were different levels within it. The gap between the strong and the weak was very obvious. There was no doubt that the Yin King was one of the experts, and his strength was extremely terrifying. What Chunzong did not know was that the Yin King's ranking on the Upper Yuan Great Saint ranking was much higher than Taigang King's. He was even in the middle of the Upper Yuan Great Saint ranking. To a certain extent, he could be considered a top half-step Great Saint expert. Chapter 1658. Updated early today. It was a small place, but there were 4 experts on the Shangyuan Great Saint list gathered. Each of them was more powerful than the other. When the terrifying aura shrouded Chunzong suddenly felt like he was going to be suppressed in a purgatory of ice and fire. Chunzong didn't dare to move. He knew that if he showed any signs of wanting to escape at this time, he would probably be immediately suppressed. While he stood still, his thoughts were as fast as lightning as he thought of a way to escape. 4 half-step great sage experts, who were even stronger than Tianmingzi, surrounded them. The pressure was enormous. Even if Chen Xiu attacked, using the evil eye of obliteration with all his strength, he still wouldn't be able to do anything to them. Of course, when the gap in strength was too big, caution became dispensable. It was just a habit. The appearance of the Yin Earth King caused the surrounding aura to become cold. Even the Taigang King's expression was solemn and fearful. "I'm going to take this kid away. You." The Yin Earth King's cold gaze first fell on Old Tu's face, as if he wanted to pierce through it. Old Tu's expression changed drastically. He then looked at Wu Zhu, and his expression changed drastically. Finally, his gaze fell on the Taigang King's face. The Taigang King's expression didn't change, but his pupils shrank slightly. "Who has an opinion?" Old Tu was silent. Wu Zhu was silent. The Taigang King's expression changed slightly, as if he was struggling in his heart. The Yin Earth King's ranking was higher than his, and he was also stronger than him. However, that ranking was decades or even 100 years ago. The Taigang King felt that his strength had improved a lot. He had become even more powerful. But then again, the Yin Earth King's strength couldn't remain the same, nor could it regress. He would only become stronger. Whether he had the confidence to fight or even defeat the Yin Earth King was still unknown. Don't be fooled by the Iron Dipper King's tall and burly appearance. His mind was very meticulous, and he thought about many things. "Why, Taigang King, do you want to test my ability?" The Earth Yin King let out an angry snort and immediately revealed a cold intent. Both of his eyes flashed with a dark and deep brilliance. It was as though there was an extremely cold dark aura spreading out and enveloping the Iron Gang King, causing him to involuntarily tremble. A shocking cold aura invaded his body. The Iron Dipper King was instinctively shocked. Only then did he realize that the strength of the Yin Dipper King was much stronger than he had imagined. Subconsciously, the Iron Gang King took a small step back. This small step was nothing, but it represented the Iron Gang King's attitude. He didn't dare to compete with the Yin King. This scene immediately caused the Yin Earth King to reveal a cold smile. Soon after, his gaze swept over and landed on Chunzong. This caused Chunzong's body to subconsciously tighten. A chill spread out from the depths of his soul, causing his spiritual flame to fluctuate incessantly. "Are you going to follow me obediently, or do you need me to make a move?" The Yin Earth King seemed to be asking for Chunzong's opinion, but it was actually a form of oppression. The invisible threat caused Chunzong's eyebrows to twitch. The sense of crisis was extremely intense. Chunzong was very clear that no matter what choice he made, it wouldn't end well in the end. Earth King. This was an expert that he couldn't fight against even if he used all his strength. Even if Chen Xiu used all his strength and used the evil eye of obliteration, he still wouldn't be able to resist. Hopeless. This was a hopeless situation. How should he break through it? In the face of danger. He didn't panic. Instead, his mind spun at an extreme speed as he constantly thought of a way to break through the situation. However, he felt that his mind was about to collapse, but he still couldn't find a way to break through it. In the end, it was still strength. If he had enough strength, he could escape from under the eyes of the other party. However, when the difference in strength was too great, everything would become illusory and futile. The Earth King didn't intend to give Chen Zong much time to think. He directly stretched out his hand and grabbed. His 5 fingers were like the claws of an earth dragon. They were suffused with a cold chill as they instantly pierced through the void and directly grabbed at Chen Zong. This claw looked simple, but it gave Chen Zong a feeling that he couldn't dodge it. No matter what he did, he couldn't escape from this claw. He could only sit and wait for death. Sitting and waiting for death was never Chen Zong's style. However, Chen Zong felt a strong sense of powerlessness in his heart. He couldn't dodge it. He couldn't dodge it. He didn't have the slightest chance. In an instant, Chen Zong's shoulder was gripped by the Earth King's claw. An extremely shocking chill invaded his entire body in an instant, causing his body to freeze as if it was frozen. His limbs were stiff and cold, and even his mind seemed to be frozen. He felt as if he had become a puppet that was controlled and taken away by the Earth King. Although Old Man Tu Wuzhu and King Taigang were dissatisfied, they didn't dare to stop him because they were afraid of the Earth King. With Chen Zong in tow, the Earth King's face revealed a smile. He wanted to quickly return to his territory and find the doppelganger's secret technique or doppelganger's secret treasure from Chen Zong. Earth King, please wait. Suddenly, a voice sounded as if it had descended from the 9th heaven. The voice was clear, but it also carried a vast and mighty aura. Who is it? The Earth King's pupils contracted slightly. The power contained in the voice made him feel fearful. As soon as the voice sounded, there seemed to be a heavenly wind sweeping through the sky. Immediately, a green figure glowing with divine light fell from the sky. It was as if the god of wind had descended to the world. Heavenly Wind King. The Earth King recognized the person. His pupils contracted instantly, showing obvious fear. On the Shangyuan Great Saint list, the Earth King was ranked 49th, which was in the middle. He was ranked higher than King Taigang and the others. However, the Heavenly Wind King was ranked 36th, which was much higher than him. If it was only a difference of a few ranks, the Earth King wouldn't be afraid because the difference in strength wouldn't be obvious. However, the difference of more than 10 ranks was different. Tianfeng King was wearing a cyan robe. His hands were clasped behind his back, and his feet were 3 feet above the ground. A gentle breeze was blowing around his body, making him look light and graceful. It was as if he could soar into the sky with the wind at any time. The Heavenly Wind King's gaze fell on Chen Zong. He smiled and said, "This must be the current Jiandi Chen Zong. Earth King, are you still not going to let go?" It seemed like a question, but it also seemed to be domineering. "Heavenly Wind King, this guy is already in my hands. You'd better not interfere," the Earth King said in a low voice, with a strong threat. "Earth King, you're wrong. Little friend Chen Zong is the Sword Emperor of this generation. His talent in the Sword Dao is extraordinary, and his attainments in the Sword Dao are outstanding. Coincidentally, I've been trying to practice the sword recently, but there are many things I don't understand." The Heavenly Wind King smiled and looked at Chen Zong. He reached out his hand and said, "Little friend, come with me to Changfeng residence." The Heavenly Wind King seemed to be kind, but Chen Zong wouldn't be deceived. This person's purpose was the same as everyone else's. It was just that the way he said it was different. Doppelganger's secret skill. Doppelganger's secret treasure. Since Tian Mingzi escaped, Chen Zong knew that trouble was inevitable. How to get out of it? Chen Zong had been thinking, but he hadn't come up with an idea. It was difficult. There was almost no hope. If the Een Earth King fought with the Heavenly Wind King, Chen Zong might have a chance to escape. Even if there was only a slight chance, Chen Zong wanted to try. In the face of the Heavenly Wind King's casual attack, the Een Earth King didn't take it. Instead, he grabbed Chen Zong's shoulder and dragged Chen Zong's body back, trying to escape. However, the Heavenly Wind King was extremely fast and his body movement was extremely mysterious. In an instant, he turned into dozens of figures and completely blocked the Een Earth King's escape route. In desperation, the Een Earth King could only let go of Chen Zong's hand and attack with all his strength. At the same time, he had to be careful not to hurt Chen Zong. Otherwise, if Chen Zong was killed, all his efforts would be in vain. The battle between the Heavenly Wind King and the Een Earth King began. Although there was a gap between their ranks and strength, the outcome couldn't be determined in a short time. Secondly, after all, both of them had to worry about Chen Zong's life and death, so they didn't dare to use all their strength. Even so, Chen Zong felt like a small boat in a stormy sea that could be destroyed at any time. At this moment, a giant palm condensed in the air, as if it contained wind and thunder. It instantly slapped down, as if it was a divine mountain of wind, thunder, water, fire, and earth. It was vast and boundless, suppressing everything. Every finger on the giant palm condensed a kind of power. Under this palm, both the Een Earth King and the Heavenly Wind King were horrified. They didn't dare to hesitate, and even ignored Chen Zong and retreated directly. When the palm fell, Chen Zong seemed to have become an ant, waiting for death to come. Terrifying. Extremely terrifying. This kind of power was overwhelming, as if it could shatter the heaven and earth. It was incomparable. The moment the falling giant palm approached Chen Zong, it paused and became gentle. With a gentle sweep, it grabbed Chen Zong and flew away quickly. Stop! Stop! The Een Earth King and the Heavenly Wind King shouted in unison and immediately chased after them. In the distance, they saw 5 figures carrying Chen Zong and flying in the direction of the bewildering light sea. Chen Zong has bought a ticket for the bewildering light sea ship. Now board the ship. The voice of one of the 5 figures sounded in the ears of the Heavenly Wind King and the Een Earth King. These 5 people were the 5 half-step great saints who were escorting the bewildering light sea ship. In a one-on-one fight, none of them was a match for the Een Earth King, let alone the Heavenly Wind King. But when the 5 of them joined forces, even the Heavenly Wind King would find it difficult to resist. The power of the palm just now was enough to prove it. The change happened too fast. Even though Chen Zong's mind was as fast as lightning, he was still stunned for a moment. From their words, he could infer that the 5 people's identities were directly related to the bewildering light sea ship. Then Chen Zong's heart suddenly beat faster. Didn't this mean that he could get away now? As long as he boarded the bewildering light sea ship. For a moment, Chen Zong was sorting out his thoughts because things happened too fast and too quickly. At first, he was targeted by Old Man Tu and Wu Zhu. Then, he was targeted by the Taigang King. The Een Earth King appeared and wanted to take him away, but was intercepted by the Heavenly Wind King. Now, it was the people from the bewildering light sea ship who wanted to take him away. Chen Zong knew that if he was a little slower, there might be more experts on the Shangyuan Great Saint list coming. At that time, the situation would become more complicated. Passive. Chapter 1659. Dense fog pervaded the air, drifting and spreading, and dazzling lights flickered. With just a glance, one would feel a sense of dizziness, as if one would be completely lost in it without being able to find the way out, and would be lost forever in it for the rest of their lives. A huge ship was anchored in it, looming in the fog and dazzling lights, but it gave off an incomparably clear feeling. At this moment there were quite a few people boarding the ship. "Go up!" The half-step great saint who grabbed Chen Zong suddenly shook his arm, and suddenly, an extremely tyrannical force burst out, throwing Chen Zong out. The force passed to every part of Chen Zong's body, making it impossible for Chen Zong to resist. His whole body was as fast as an arrow leaving the bow. In an instant, Chen Zong flew out of the range of the Upper Yuan realm, rushed into the bewildering light sea, broke through layers of fog and dazzling lights, and quickly rushed to the bewildering light sea crossing ship. In the blink of an eye, Chen Zong appeared above the huge ship and quickly fell. At this point, Chen Zong was able to control his body and landed lightly. The moment his feet touched the ground, Chen Zong felt a sense of security. He was free. He had finally escaped from the encirclement of a group of terrifying experts. Next, he would use the bewildering light sea crossing ship to cross the bewildering light sea and enter the supreme mystery realm. But while he felt safe, Chen Zong did not feel relaxed at all, because the news was very likely to spread to the supreme mystery realm. At that time, he would also encounter a similar situation in the supreme mystery realm. Strength, strength, strength. I want more strength. Chen Zong's heart was filled with an incomparable desire for strength. However, he was also very clear that great strength was not obtained out of thin air, but through his own efforts and continuous cultivation, which ultimately required a lot of energy and a lot of time. Compared to those experts, his advantage was that he was young, but his disadvantage was also that he was young. Because of his youth, he still had great potential that had not been tapped. His future strength might surpass theirs. But also because of his youth, his cultivation time was too short compared to theirs, and there was no comparison at all. It was urgent. Right now, the level of his enemies was too high. They had surpassed the level of the saint realm and had risen to the level of a half-step great saint. However, his own growth seemed to be unable to keep up. Although they were safe for the time being, it wasn't true safety. It was only temporary. Once he stepped into the highest profundity realm, he might encounter the covetous eyes and pursuit of other cultivators. But now, he couldn't think of any way to get out of this situation, because whether he went to the highest profundity realm or stayed in the Upper Yuan realm, he couldn't avoid the covetous eyes of powerful enemies. The most direct and effective way to break out of this situation was through strength. As for the consequences of handing over the doppelganger mystic technique, he would definitely not end up well. What other methods were there? The loss of Azura's avatar, Chen Xiu? If he made up his mind, Chen Xiu was also willing to pay the price. However, it was truly too much of a pity. Immediately, Chen Zong's eyes lit up. He finally thought of a way, but he wasn't sure if it would work. After all, he still needed the help of external objects, and the implementation of this method could only be handed over to his avatar, Chen Xiu. Ignoring the gazes of others, Chen Zong temporarily put down all his worries and stared ahead. His eyes flickered with a trace of dark brilliance. It was the first layer of the phantom perception black pupil. He could vaguely see that there was a great battle taking place on the shore. The two sides of the battle were the 5 half-step great saints on the mystifying light ship, the King of Underground Een and the King of Heavenly Wind. Without any scruples, each of them unleashed their full strength, which was very terrifying. Every claw of the King of Underground Een was suffused with an extremely shocking cold aura, as if it could tear and freeze everything. It penetrated and corroded the soul, flesh, and blood. It was extremely terrifying and could destroy all life. Boundless cold aura was also stirred up, spreading out from the ground and enveloping the surroundings. It was as if an independent space had been formed, and an incomparably terrifying pressure attacked from all directions, suppressing the 5 bewildering Light Kings. Under the fury of the King of Heavenly Wind, it was as if a hurricane roared and destroyed everything. The terrifying power tore everything apart. As the hurricane swept across, it also shrouded in all directions, as if forming a small space. This was an ability that only the more powerful half-step Great Sage experts could master. It could suppress the target. In a one-on-one battle, none of the 5 kings of mystifying light was a match for the King of Underground Een, let alone the King of Heavenly Wind and the King of Heavenly Wind. However, the 5 kings of mystifying light were best at joint attack. Once the 5 of them formed a formation, their strength would increase by more than 10 times, becoming extremely tyrannical. For a moment, the formation formed by the 5 kings of mystifying light actually suppressed the King of Heavenly Wind and the King of Underground Een. As he read, Chernzong began to ponder. The 5 bewildering Light Kings acted too abruptly, and there was no friendship between them. Yet, they helped him so much. Was it really just because he bought a ticket to the bewildering light ship and was a guest of the 5 bewildering Light Kings? This reason seemed to be a little too far-fetched. Then, there was only one possibility left, which was the most likely one. The 5 kings of mystifying light also coveted the so-called doppelganger secret technique or doppelganger secret treasure. This was the biggest reason why they acted. There was no such thing as love or hate for no reason. Everything was driven by interest. It was that simple. While Chernzong was pondering, the battle suddenly ended because the 5 kings of mystifying light did not intend to fight to the death with the King of Underground Een and the King of Heavenly Wind. Their target was only Chernzong. Now that Chernzong was already on the mystifying light ship, there was no need to continue the battle. In an instant, the 5 kings of mystifying light burst out with their most powerful attack. 5 different Tao wills and powers blasted out, but they condensed into one, erupting with a terrifying power. The King of Heavenly Wind did not dare to take it head-on, and could only dodge. After dodging, the 5 kings of mystifying light immediately retreated, and under their joint hand seals, they instantly burst out with an astonishing speed. In just a moment they had left the battlefield, shuttled through the fog and dazzling light, and flew rapidly toward the mystifying light ship. At the same time, the mystifying light ship also moved and quickly left. As the 5 kings of mystifying light retreated, they continued to attack with astonishing power to disrupt the fog and dazzling light, and to stop the pursuit of the King of Underground Een and the King of Underground Een. Earlier, the mystifying light ship had been in a state of activation, so once it moved, its speed quickly reached an astonishing level, and was not any slower than a half-step Great Saint. With such meticulous cooperation, the King of Underground Een and the King of Heavenly Wind could only watch as the 5 kings of mystifying light fell into the mystifying light ship and quickly left. Chase. But they were stopped. The deeper they went into the mystifying light sea, the more fearful the King of Underground Een and the King of Heavenly Wind were, because the deeper they went into the mystifying light sea, the greater the possibility of getting lost. They did not have the mystifying light ship. The special ability of the mystifying light ship was that it could ignore the environment of the mystifying light sea to a certain extent and successfully shuttle between the upper Yuan realm and the highest mystery realm. But half-step Great Saint experts did not have this ability. Once they went deep into the mystifying light sea, they would most likely get lost. There were a few experts on the Shangyuan Great Saint list whose whereabouts were unknown. It was said that they entered the mystifying light sea for various reasons. Hundreds of years had passed, and there was no trace of them, not even in the highest mystery realm. This meant that they were either trapped in the mystifying light sea, or had died in the mystifying light sea. The King of Heavenly Wind and the King of Underground Een had no reason not to be afraid. They stopped chasing and returned to the shore angrily. Immediately, the King of Heavenly Wind launched an extremely powerful attack, like a destructive storm, at the King of Underground Een. If the King of Underground Een had not stopped him, Chernzong would have been taken away by him, and the 5 kings of mystifying light would not have had time to intervene. The King of Underground Een was caught off guard and was immediately bombarded, but he reacted in an instant and resisted the attack, his blood and chi surging. "What are you doing?" the King of Underground Een roared. The King of Heavenly Wind did not speak, and launched a second attack. Although the King of Underground Een was extremely angry, he did not intend to fight with the King of Heavenly Wind. Instead, he resisted and retreated. Firstly, he could not defeat the King of Heavenly Wind. Secondly, there was no need to fight. After all, Chernzong had been taken away by the 5 kings of mystifying light. He did not expect that the 5 kings of mystifying light would be the biggest winner in the end. The news would spread quickly, and if other experts knew about it, the 5 kings of mystifying light would become the target of public criticism. However, the 5 kings of mystifying light knew the consequences, and they would bear the consequences. In fact, anyone who wanted to kill Chernzong was already mentally prepared to face other experts. Their thoughts were very simple. As long as they could obtain a doppelganger secret technique or a doppelganger artifact, they could hide in the bewildering light sea and wait until their doppelganger was refined and possessed strength no weaker than their own before reappearing. At that time, when their original body and doppelganger joined forces, it would be extremely terrifying. Thinking about it, if the 5 brothers joined forces, their strength could already surpass experts like the King of Heavenly Wind. If the 5 doppelganger joined forces, they could easily suppress experts like the King of Heavenly Wind. At that time, they would not be afraid even if they had to face the top 10 experts in the Shangyuan Great Saint Realm. "Little friend, please come into the room for a chat," one of the 5 kings of mystifying light said to Chernzong with a smile. The other 4 half-step Great Saint Realm experts also stared at Chernzong with different expressions. Chernzong's perception was very sharp, and he could feel a sense of malice from the 5 kings of mystifying light. However, this time, since he could not avoid it, he would face it head-on. There were no restrictions or seals in the room. Perhaps it was because the 5 kings of mystifying light were very confident in their strength. They were certain that a mere Saint Rudiment Realm expert would not be able to escape from the encirclement of the 5 of them. Moreover, they were now in the mystifying light sea. If they left the mystifying light sea, they would be lost in it for the rest of their lives. Therefore, they were not afraid of Chernzong. "Little friend, the 5 of us have saved your life. You can consider us as your saviors," one of the 5 kings of mystifying light said with a smile. Junior thanks the 5 seniors for their help. Chernzong immediately cupped his fists and bowed. "I never thought that I would make 5 seniors go through so much trouble just to borrow the mystifying light sea to go to the profound realm. I am very grateful." Chapter 1660. In a room on the mystifying light ship, Chernzong was surrounded by the 5 kings of mystifying light. He had just escaped from a pack of wolves and fell into a tiger's den. Chernzong's heart was heavy. Now that it was the last moment, he could only take the risk. "Before that, summon your doppelganger." One of the 5 kings of mystifying light suddenly laughed. He wanted to confirm further. After all, everything was just hearsay. He had not seen it with his own eyes, so it was still a little unreal. Chernzong's expression changed slightly when he heard this, but he was very cooperative. Suddenly, a black light flickered between his eyebrows, and Azura doppelganger Chen Xiu shot out and landed beside Chernzong. They had different robes and auras, but their appearances were exactly the same. Their figures were also exactly the same. The 5 kings of mystifying light suddenly became excited. Doppelganger! It was really a doppelganger, and its aura was very powerful. Good, very good. You really have a doppelganger. Junior, Hand over your doppelganger's secret method or doppelganger's secret treasure. You'd better cooperate, or I'll let you know what it means to live a life worse than death. Threat. The 5 kings of mystifying light all revealed a ferocious look as they threatened Chen Zong. This was their purpose of saving Chen Zong. In fact, rather than saving, it was better to say that they were intercepting Chen Zong. Their purpose was the same as those people before. I can have a doppelganger not because of a secret method, but because of a secret treasure, Chen Zong said calmly. Hearing Chen Zong's words, the 5 kings of mystifying light suddenly looked a little disappointed. Compared to a secret treasure, they wanted a secret method more. After all, a secret method meant that they could all cultivate it, but if it was a secret treasure, perhaps only one of them could use it, which meant that the other 4 could not have a doppelganger. However, they were already prepared. A secret treasure was good too. They would consider who to give it to after they got it. Hand over the secret treasure. The person with a cold expression said sternly. The doppelganger's secret treasure is this sword. This time, it was Chen Xiu who spoke and raised the sword in his hand. The sword was gray in color and appeared to be quite ordinary, but under the 5 bewildering light monarchs' divine sense, they were unable to see through its profundities. That was not a divine weapon. It gave them an unfathomable feeling, as if it contained an extremely terrifying power. For a moment, the 5 confused Light Kings were mostly convinced that this was a doppelganger artifact. Hand it over. The person who spoke sternly immediately grabbed the Nirvana evil sword in Chen Xiu's hand. Stop! Chen Xiu slashed with his sword and dodged at the same time. It's not impossible for me to hand over the secret treasure, but you have to let my true body leave first, Chen Xiu said, negotiating conditions. One of the 5 bewildering Light Kings was immediately astonished when his attack was evaded. Soon after, he sneered, "This is the bewildering light ocean. If I let your true body leave, only death will await you." "That's my business," Chen Zong said unhurriedly. This was something he had considered beforehand. Escaping from the wolf's claws and falling into the tiger's den, Chen Zong would not just sit there and wait for death. He had to think of a way. Strength was the most effective and direct way to break out of this situation, but great strength was not something that could be achieved in an instant. It needed to be accumulated over a long period of time. The only way now was to leave the sea-crossing bewildering light ship and escape the control of the 5 bewildering Light Kings. As for what would happen after entering the bewildering light ocean, that was something to be considered later. Perhaps the bewildering light ocean was full of danger, but that did not mean there was no chance of survival. Perhaps he would wander around the bewildering light ocean for some time, but that did not mean he had no chance of leaving. If his true body left first, his doppelganger would have a chance to escape, and if it was really impossible, he could only abandon his doppelganger. His true body was more important. This was an act of cutting off all means of retreat, a final gamble. "If you don't let my true body leave, I will destroy this artifact," Chen Xiu threatened again, striking the 5 bewildering Light Kings' hearts. They were not sure whether this doppelganger artifact would be destroyed. In an instant, the 5 bewildering Light Kings made a decision. In the bewildering light ocean, if it were not for the sea-crossing bewildering light ship, even if the 5 of them entered, they would not have any advantage. A Saint Realm cultivator, no matter how talented he was still a Saint Realm cultivator. Whether he could survive after entering the bewildering light ocean was still unknown. Even if he could not leave the bewildering light ocean. Good, in an instant, the 5 bewildering Light Kings released their aura lock on Chen Zong. Without hesitation, Chen Zong immediately rushed out of the room and quickly flew out of the sea-crossing bewildering light ship. This scene suddenly fell into the eyes of everyone present, causing their expressions to change drastically. Who is that person? He actually left the sea-crossing bewildering light ship on his own. Is he seeking death? How can there be such a stupid person in this world? These people did not understand what had happened at all and could only speculate based on their own subjective opinions. Feeling his true body quickly leave the sea crossing bewildering light ship and quickly escape into the bewildering light ocean, Chern Xiu secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Now it was time to go all out. Good, my true body has already left, so I can give you this doppelganger artifact, but once I give it to you, my doppelganger will disappear, Chen Xiu said with a sigh, feeling very regretful. It's already good enough that his true body can survive, one of the 5 bewildering Light Kings sneered. They had finally succeeded. It was not that they were stupid, but that they did not know the secret of the doppelganger and had been misled by the news from the beginning, thinking it might be an artifact or a secret technique. But now, Chern Zong said it was an artifact, and he even took out a sword that they couldn't see through, making them believe him even more. He even cautiously allowed his main body to leave first, further solidifying their impressions and belief. Unconsciously, they became even more convinced that the sword was a doppelganger artifact. Take it, Chen Xiu said very decisively. Afterwards, an extremely terrifying power immediately erupted from the Nirvanic evil sword. The presence of Nirvanic destruction instantly erupted like a volcano, trying to destroy everything in the surroundings. The 5 bewildering Light Kings originally wanted to take the so-called doppelganger artifact, but the sudden burst of power made their expressions change drastically, and they instinctively felt that something was wrong. Evil Eye of Nirvana. Chern Xiu erupted with all his strength, and with the help of the Nirvana evil sword's power, he almost exploded. Exerting all his strength, Yang Kai displayed the evil Eye of Nirvana. The Nirvana riding wheel condensed in an instant and swept out, bursting out with an incomparably astonishing power, as if the heavens and earth were about to be destroyed. The entire bewildering light ship shook violently, as if it was about to be destroyed by this terrifying force. You dare! Damn it! How could the 5 bewildering Light Kings not know that they had been deceived? At least, they did not know whether the doppelganger artifact was real or fake, but the other party had no intention of giving it to them. The giant gray wheel that suddenly appeared exuded an astonishing monstrous aura, as if it wanted to destroy everything between the heavens and earth. If Tian Mingzi were to face such power, he would have been defeated and killed in an instant. However, the 5 bewildering Light Kings' reaction was extremely fast, and their combined strength was many times stronger than Tian Mingzi's. Facing this tyrannical Nirvana evil wheel, they were not defeated. The power of the Nirvana evil sword poured into Chen Xiu's body, and Chen Xiu continued to erupt, pouring into the Nirvana riding wheel. Boom! What's going on? What the hell is going on? Outside, each of them looked horrified. They felt that the bewildering light ship seemed to be constantly bombarded by some terrible force, and they were all terrified. Because if the bewildering light ship was destroyed, they would fall into the bewildering light sea, and at that time their life and death would be unknown. The 5 bewildering Light Kings also looked horrified. In any case, the bewildering light ship could not be destroyed. They attacked with all their strength. They must block it. Resist. The Nirvana riding wheel and the 5 bewildering Light Kings joined forces to resist. With the support of the Nirvana evil sword's power, Chen Xiu displayed the evil Eye of Nirvana to fight 1 against 5, and for a time, he did not fall into a disadvantageous position. The power of the Nirvana evil sword was constantly being consumed, and Chen Xiu felt that something was wrong. It's not enough. It's still not strong enough. Otherwise, he could kill the 5 bewildering Light Kings, occupy the bewildering light ship, and take back his main body. Now, it seemed that he really had to escape to the bewildering light sea. Explode! An extremely muffled roar suddenly rang out. Immediately after, the Nirvana riding wheel that had condensed to the point where it seemed to be solid trembled slightly. In an instant it turned around at an astonishing speed. All the power seemed to converge into the deepest part of the riding wheel in an instant. Then, like a volcano erupting in an instant, an extremely terrifying destructive power exploded, destroying everything. This tyrannical power that was like the explosion of chaos directly tore apart the power that the 5 bewildering Light Kings had set up together. Chen Xiu took this opportunity to grab the Nirvana evil sword and turned into a gray stream of light to quickly escape. He directly entered the bewildering light sea and headed in the direction of Chen Zong's original body. Attack with all your strength! The 5 bewildering Light Kings roared one after another. They ignored the exhaustion of their power and attacked with all their strength, because if they did not do so, they might die under this terrifying explosion. Even if they did not die, the bewildering light ship might be completely destroyed, and at that time, they could only stay in the bewildering light sea. Attack with all your strength! The 5 bewildering Light Kings displayed an astonishing strength. Under their joint attack, their strength increased by more than 10 times, and they restrained the power of the Nirvana riding wheel's explosion within the room, and did not leak out. However, cracks continued to spread on the walls, roof, and floor of the room. This extremely shocking explosion lasted for dozens of breaths of time before it gradually subsided. The incomparably violent power wreaked havoc without end, and gradually quieted down, leaving behind countless cracks and fragments. The 5 bewildering Light Kings' faces were pale, and that was because they had exhausted too much power in an instant. They were panting, exhausted, and in pain all over their bodies. This feeling was like being continuously hit by a sledgehammer, and it was extremely uncomfortable. But compared to the discomfort of their bodies, what was even more uncomfortable was their hearts. A feeling of being humiliated and trampled on spread all over their bodies, and they almost went crazy. They did not hesitate to become enemies with other half-step great saint powerhouses to snatch the opportunity, but they did not expect that in the end, not only did they fail to snatch it, but they also got themselves into trouble. Moreover, the 5 of them were half-step great saint powerhouses, and they had never suffered a big loss for many years. This time, they were toyed with by a Saint Realm Jr., and it was under the circumstances that they thought they had everything under control. Humiliation! What a great humiliation! This kind of humiliation could not be washed away without blood. Looking back at the year 2017, 365 days a year, I, Six Dao, sat in front of the computer and wrote on the screen almost every day. I think I am quite dedicated to my work. Of course, it was inevitable that there would be situations where I did not update in time due to unexpected events, and Six Dao would also make an explanation. The reason why Six Dao was so dedicated to his work and treated writing as a sacred career and persevered, in addition to his own hobbies and job requirements, was also inseparable from the support and care of his junior brothers and sisters. You are like the sun on a cold winter day, warming my body and mind. You are like herbal tea on a hot summer day, cooling my lungs. You are like gasoline and electricity, allowing my car to continue driving. Here, I thank you for your support and care, and I express my sincere gratitude. Words are too weak to fully express Six Dao's gratitude to you, and it can only be interpreted partially. Looking forward to the year 2018, Six Dao will take your support and care to write even more firmly. I will write a story that everyone will like as much as possible, and write a character's journey that everyone can identify with. I also hope that my junior brothers and sisters will continue to support me, encourage me, and care for me even more. To make a long story short, everything was done in silence. On the eve of the Spring Festival, Six Dao would like to send everyone the most sincere blessings, wishing everyone a happy new year, a happy family, healthy body, and a fruitful career. Chapter 1661. The fog was thick and the dazzling light flowed like water. Traces of extremely fierce evil qi filled the air, shuttling back and forth. Once one entered this place, they would immediately lose their sense of direction. All means of finding directions seemed to be ineffective. There was no sun, no moon, no stars, no white clouds or dark clouds. There was nothing to rely on and nothing to compare. Here, there was only endless fog and dazzling brilliance. The brilliance was pale and filled with endless destruction, as if there was no life, only death. Chen Zong looked around blankly. It was difficult to determine the direction, so he could only keep moving forward. It was safer to stay away from the ship of confusion sea. As the main body, Chen Zong could clearly sense his doppelganger within a certain distance. Therefore, when Chen Xiu unleashed all his power and even borrowed the power of the evil extinguishing sword to escape, Chen Zong stopped and waited for Chen Xiu to return. Not long after, a gray light streaked through the thick fog and dazzling brilliance, instantly entering Chen Zong's glabella and straight into his spirit sea. Chen Zong could clearly feel that Chen Xiu's current state was not good. Not only was his strength exhausted, but he had also slightly injured himself. Fortunately, this was self-healing, and his strength could be recovered. However, the evil extinguishing sword's aura had become weak. The vitality that it had devoured from killing the evil void devil was almost exhausted. The loss was great, but he and his doppelganger were safe and survived. There was hope if they survived, but the 5 kings of confusion light. Chen Zong's eyes flashed with an extremely sharp brilliance, like the edge of a sword cutting through the fog and dazzling brilliance. The astonishing sword intent contained in it seemed to be able to tear everything apart. If it were not for the 5 kings of confusion light, he would not have fallen into such a situation. This hatred must be avenged. However, he was not strong enough and was not a match for the 5 kings of confusion light. Another point was that he had to leave this sea of confusion light first. What kind of danger was hidden in the sea of confusion light? After all, he had only known about it before. He had not seen or experienced it with his own eyes. But there was no doubt that the sea of confusion light was very dangerous. He had to be very cautious. Spreading out his divine sense, Chen Zong found that his divine sense was greatly affected here. It was still clear within a range of about a kilometer, but beyond that, it became very blurry and constantly dissipating. When the divine sense spread out beyond a kilometer, it was consumed 10 times faster than usual. It was very shocking. Even though Chen Zong's divine sense had covered a radius of 1,000 meters, the consumption rate was still 2 to 3 times higher than usual. If it weren't for the fact that Chen Zong's divine sense was pure and powerful, and that he was constantly circulating the first part of the spirit control technique to replenish his divine sense, he would still be able to keep up with the consumption rate. However, when he focused his eyes, it was difficult for him to see beyond 500 meters. After about 100 meters, his vision would become blurry, and after 300 meters, he could only see endless fog and dazzling light. He could not see anything else. After all, 300 meters and a kilometer was nothing in normal times, but in this dangerous place, it could be a life-saving or fatal distance. What Chen Zong did not know was that if it were any other Saint Realm expert, even if they were at the peak of the Saint Realm, their divine sense could only cover a radius of 100 meters at most. If it exceeded 100 meters, the consumption would be amazing. Even if they could maintain a distance of 100 meters, they would not be able to maintain it for long. Moreover, unless they cultivated some kind of eye technique, their vision would be greatly affected. At most, they would only be able to see a few dozen meters, which was far from being comparable to Chen Zong. Therefore, if a Saint Realm expert entered this place, they would almost certainly die. If they were lucky enough to survive, they would be completely lost and wander around like headless flies. In comparison, the visibility range was extremely small, and the bewildering light sea was very large. According to the flying speed of a normal half-step great sage, it would generally take nearly a month to cross it. That was under the condition that the road was unobstructed. However, in the sea of confusion light, there was endless fog and dazzling light, making it difficult to distinguish direction and target. Once one was unable to distinguish the direction, one would think they were flying forward, but they would unwittingly deviate to where they ended up. It was unknown how many masters had become lost in this place, unable to find the way out. Chen Zong flew slowly, constantly moving forward based on his intuition. He seemed to be heading in the direction of the profound realm, but whether this was the case or not, Chen Zong was not sure, because when one's vision and divine sense were greatly limited, one's sense of direction would be greatly affected. "I'm not sure." Even so, Chen Zong could not stop. He had to take a gamble. Maybe he would be lucky. As he flew, Chen Zong suddenly felt a chill run down his spine, as if he was being stared at by something terrifying. The shadow of death shrouded him, and a chill invaded his body. His figure stopped. Chen Zong's eyes became dark and deep in an instant, and the whites of his eyes seemed to be swallowed up by the black light. He stared ahead, but saw nothing. Under the serene black pupil, Chen Zong did not see anything. Under the coverage of divine sense, he also did not find anything, but the sense of crisis gradually increased. Heart domain. Without hesitation, Chen Zong opened the heart domain, directly covering a radius of 2,000 square meters, and a figure suddenly entered his perception. It seemed to be condensed from endless gray fog, and was filled with an extremely shocking evil spirit. The evil spirit was monstrous and extremely fierce. There was an indescribable ancient and ferocious aura, as if Azura had been reborn. In an instant, the figure condensed from the fog flashed, turning into an extremely dazzling streamer, like lightning, and approached Chen Zong. The extreme evil spirit instantly broke through, showing no mercy, as if it wanted to drown Chen Zong forever. Fast. The foggy figure was extremely fast, as swift as a bolt of lightning. The pitch-black sword light suddenly flashed, cutting through the thick fog, shattering the dazzling light, and killing the foggy figure with irresistible force. In the next moment, Chen Zong's pupils contracted, and a ripple of surprise appeared on his handsome face. The deep night sword directly pierced through the foggy figure, but it did not feel like it had hit a physical body. However, the other party transformed into a fog blade with a pale and broken light, piercing through the air and piercing towards his forehead, causing Chen Zong to feel a faint pain between his eyebrows, as if he had been pierced. Danger! If he was pierced, he would most likely not have a good ending. The moment the fog blade pierced through the air, Chen Zong's subconscious exploded, and his head tilted slightly. The fog blade quickly swept past his ear, and without any pause, it directly slashed horizontally. Chen Zong's reaction was very fast. His body was low, and the fog blade cut through the air above his head, cutting off a few strands of hair. Fast. Not only was it fast, but it was also very agile. The fog blade in his hand was constantly attacking, and like a maggot, it surrounded Chen Zong, constantly cutting and stabbing. Every attack was very dangerous, and it brought an extremely strong threat to Chen Zong. Dodge. Chen Zong kept dodging, compressing his heart domain to a radius of 10 meters, and using the formless sky wind body technique to the extreme, so that he could avoid the attacks of the fog blade again and again. In addition, his sword could not hurt the other party, as if the other party was condensed by the fog and did not have a physical body. It was difficult for him to hurt a strong enemy without a physical body, but every attack of the other party brought extreme danger to him. How could he fight against such a strong enemy? The power of the Taichu sword origin technique was ineffective. Chen Zong seized the opportunity and blasted out with the mixed iron forging hands. The extremely terrifying fire force hit the misty figure in an instant, and the astonishing power exploded in an instant, blowing it to pieces. However, the sense of danger did not disappear. In the short span of a breath, the endless mist surged over, mixed with the wisps of profound light, and once again converged to attack. Chen Zong tried all sorts of methods. He either pierced through it directly or exploded it into pieces. However, he was unable to truly destroy it. I wonder if the purple world-destroying fire can really hurt the other party? Chen Zong thought to himself. Immediately, he blocked the fog blade with his sword. The moment the fog blade hit the deep night sword, it suddenly dissipated, and reappeared in front of Chen Zong's forehead, condensing again and piercing through the air. Chen Zong's figure flashed and turned, narrowly avoiding the attack of the fog blade, and blasted out a hand. The purple world-destroying fire burned fiercely, directly hitting the other party's body. In an instant, it burned as if oil was poured on the fire. Popping sounds could be heard continuously, as if firewood was being burned to pieces. In just an instant, the misty figure turned into a flaming figure that burned continuously. It seemed to be struggling and rolling about, and there seemed to be a sharp and shrill sound that could be heard continuously. It seemed to be suffering a great deal of pain. Chen Zong did not attack again, but retreated to a certain distance, watching coldly from the side. It seemed that the purple world-destroying fire was effective against it, but it did not seem to be powerful enough to kill it in a short time. Then, the burning foggy figure quickly rushed down, and in the blink of an eye, disappeared from Chen Zong's sight. Chen Zong wanted to confirm whether the purple world-destroying fire could really eliminate it, so he immediately chased after it. The burning figure plunged into the water of the bewildering light sea, went deeper and deeper, and disappeared. Chen Zong did not plunge into the sea, because the sea was pale and gray, and looked very strange to Chen Zong. And the closer he got, the more oppressive he felt, and it was difficult to breathe. His emotions were slightly agitated uncontrollably, and there was a kind of heart palpitating from the depths of his heart. It seemed that there was some terrible danger hidden in the sea. Chen Zong had learned that there was a kind of beast in the bewildering light sea called the bewildering light sea beast, or the bewildering light sea beast. It was a kind of beast without any intelligence, but it was very terrifying and powerful. The strength of each bewildering light sea beast was at least at the level of an ordinary half-step great sage, and the powerful ones could even be said to be at the level of an invincible half-step great sage. With his current strength, it would be very dangerous if he encountered a bewildering light sea beast. In desperation, Chen Zong could only give up chasing the foggy figure. Although he was not sure whether the purple world-destroying fire could really kill it, he could at least be sure of one thing, and that was that the purple world-destroying fire was enough of a threat to it. Otherwise, the foggy figure would not have struggled and howled and plunged into the sea. Chapter 1662. Within the bewildering light ocean, there were layers of fog and endless dazzling light. Chen Zong became increasingly cautious. Here, his vision was greatly hindered, and his divine sense was obviously restrained. His movements were not as convenient, and he did not dare to use his full speed. He could only restrain himself and slow down. Moreover, he had to be careful every time he moved, not daring to relax in the slightest. Especially the 3 times he had been assassinated by the misty figure. That misty figure appeared and disappeared unpredictably and abruptly. If it wasn't for the domain of heart, Chen Zong wasn't sure if he would still be unscathed. In all 3 attacks, Chen Zong relied on the purple horizon incineration fire to resolve the crisis. However, he was not sure if he had really killed the foggy figures. At the very least, he had repelled them, which meant that compared to other forces, the purple horizon incineration fire was indeed effective. Here, he could not feel the passage of time. Chen Zong did not know how long he had been traveling, nor how long he would stay here. One thing was for sure, and that was that he had deviated from his direction. Since the first foggy figure's attack, that battle had completely disrupted his grasp of direction. Following that, he was completely relying on his intuition. Whether he could leave the bewildering light ocean or not, he was not very sure. However, Chen Zong did not regret entering the bewildering light ocean. It was better than falling into the hands of the 5 bewildering light kings. Advance. Gradually advancing, Chen Zong did not know what to do for a moment. He could only take one step at a time. His divine sense maintained a range of 1,000 meters, and his heart domain also expanded to 2,000 meters. In this way, even if the foggy figures suddenly appeared, he could react immediately. Suddenly, Chen Zong felt a strong palpitation sweep over him, as if a volcano had erupted. That palpitation came from below, in the bewildering light ocean. The strong palpitation made Chen Zong's expression change abruptly. He was extremely frightened. This feeling made him unable to resist at all, and he would be defeated and killed in an instant. Without hesitation, Chen Zong released his suppressed speed and rushed forward. First, he used the Thunder Steps 9 heavens, then he used the formless sky wind. In the blink of an eye, he had rushed several thousand meters away. A wave of earth-shattering rumbling sounded out from behind him, and it was so violent that it caused Chen Zong's expression to go grim as he felt extremely horrified. Almost, if it wasn't for his acute sense of danger, he would have died. Although he didn't see anything, Chen Zong reckoned that a bewildering light sea beast had rushed out of the water. It was too astonishing. One had to pay attention to the ambush of the shadowy figures and the appearance of the perplexing light sea beasts. This place was truly dangerous. Even a peak half-step great sage expert could fall here if they were not vigilant enough. Chen Zong's heart sank slightly. From the looks of it, it would not be an easy task to leave. Calming himself down, he maintained a high level of vigilance and continued to move forward. After an unknown period of time, Zhang Xian's heart domain sensed traces of aura fluctuations. As he got closer, the aura fluctuations became more obvious and more intense. The fluctuations were chaotic and constantly collided. It seemed like someone was fighting. Someone's here. Chen Zong's face lit up. Traveling alone in this deathly silent and dangerous place, one had to maintain a high level of vigilance at all times. It was fine for a short period of time, but as time went on, the pressure on one's heart would be indescribable. Chen Zong's will was extremely tenacious. Until now, he had not been affected. However, Chen Zong was also very clear that as time went on, he would inevitably feel impetuous and even irritable. In that kind of situation, he would lose his calm judgment. Once he encountered an ambush, it would be extremely dangerous. Even if he did not encounter any danger, being impetuous for a long period of time would affect his temperament. In serious cases, it would even affect one's foundation and become impure. Now that he encountered a battle, it might be other cultivators who had entered the bewildering light sea. No matter what, it was necessary to meet them. Perhaps he could get some information from them. Chen Zong rapidly approached while releasing his aura fluctuations. Only then would he not appear too abrupt. This way, the other party would also be able to sense him. Chen Zong also clearly sensed that one of the two parties in the battle was indeed a cultivator. His aura fluctuations were very strong, indicating that he was a half-step Great Saint powerhouse. He did not feel any weaker than the Een Earth King. The opponent of this half-step Great Saint powerhouse was 3 misty figures. The 3 misty figures appeared and disappeared unpredictably. They surrounded the half-step Great Saint powerhouse and constantly attacked. When hit, the misty figures would disperse in an instant and recondense in another place. They would attack again like ghosts. The misty blades on their bodies seemed to be the only substance. However, the misty blades could also disperse and recondense in an instant like mist. It was very strange. Chen Zong maintained a distance of about 500 meters, observing how the half-step Great Saint powerhouse dealt with the 3 misty figures. He wanted to see if he had any other tricks up his sleeve. The three misty figures were very strong. They had almost reached the limit of the Saint Rudiment realm. An ordinary peak 9th layer Saint Rudiment realm expert would be instantly killed by them. However, the strength of the half-step Great Saint powerhouse was very strong. With a sweep of his tyrannical power, he could easily shatter them with a light blow. Immediately, the half-step Great Saint powerhouse waved his hand and a blazing flame swept out. The flame was silver and very pure. It had an astonishingly holy aura. As the silver flame swept out, it directly hit the three misty figures. The misty figures immediately burned. In just a few breaths, they were burned into nothingness, leaving behind three translucent bean-sized objects. The half-step Great Saint powerhouse casually waved his hand and immediately collected the three bean-sized objects. Chernzong was very curious. Which fellow Taoist is this? Please show yourself. After doing all this, the half-step Great Saint powerhouse swept his gaze over and said in a solemn voice. His voice seemed to condense into a wave and spread out in the shape of a ripple. As Chernzong approached, he maintained a high level of vigilance. During this period of time, Chernxiu's strength had also recovered to its peak. Only the Nirvana Evil Sword's energy had not been replenished and was in a weakened state. Even so, with the combination of his true body and his clone, they could still erupt with tyrannical strength. No matter how strong the other party was, Chernzong was confident he could escape with the help of the bewildering Light Sea's environment. It was worth mentioning that Chernxiu's continuous use of the Evil Eye of Obliteration had deepened his mastery of the Evil Eye of Obliteration. His control of it had become more refined and its power had increased correspondingly. When the half-step Great Saint powerhouse saw Chernzong, he seemed to be taken aback. This was because he could sense that Chernzong's cultivation was not high. He was only at the 8th layer Saint Rudiment stage. A mere 8th layer Saint Rudiment stage cultivator actually dared to enter the bewildering Light Sea. He was simply courting death. It seemed like he had just entered the bewildering Light Sea not long ago. While the other party was sizing up Chernzong, Chernzong was also sizing up the other party. This half-step Great Sage expert was an old man with long hair and beard. His beard was slightly white, and his complexion was ruddy. He didn't look fierce, but he also didn't look friendly. However, he had an indescribable temperament. The old man was dressed in a gray robe and his aura was restrained. However, Chernzong could keenly sense that the other party's aura was very strong. He was definitely a powerhouse who could be ranked on the Shangyuan Great Saint list. Moreover, Chernzong was certain the silver flame the other party had used earlier was a type of heavenly rare fire. Moreover, it was a 9th grade heavenly rare fire. Moreover, Chernzong was more or less certain that the silver flame was a heavenly rare fire that had been merged many times. An ordinary 9th layer Saint Rudiment stage cultivator would not be able to resist it at all. From the looks of it, the heavenly mystic flame was indeed capable of killing the misty figure. It was just that the might of his purple horizon incineration flame was not strong enough. Thus, he was unable to kill the misty figure in a short period of time and could only force it back. Chernxiu greet Senior. Chernzong cupped his fists and bowed to the old man from dozens of meters away. You just entered the bewildering Light Sea, right? The old man asked with a smile. Yes. Senior, have you been here for a long time? How should I address you, Senior? Chernzong asked in return. At the same time, he remained vigilant because he could not be sure if the other party would suddenly attack him. One could not be too careful in a place like this. Therefore, Chernzong did not reveal his real name. Instead, he used his clone's name. After all, the name Chernzong was connected to the word Jiendi. It was easy to make the connection. Chernzong was not sure if the old man had heard of it before. As for the name Chernxiu, other than himself, only his clone knew about it. Therefore, the old man should not be able to recognize his identity. This old man has been in the bewildering light sea for dozens of years, but I am not sure exactly how long it has been, the old man said with a wry smile. As for this old man's name, in the outside world, some people call me the Tiangong Elder. Tiangong Elder? Chernzong's eyes widened in surprise. Tiangong Elder? The Grandmaster Forger that Tian Jianzi mentioned. At first, Chernzong naturally wanted to find a Tiangong Elder to forge a royal god weapon for him. However, the Tiangong Elder's whereabouts were uncertain, and he had not appeared for many years. No one knew where he was, so there was no way to find him. Therefore, Chernzong could only compromise and find the fake Grandmaster Tianlingzi. Because of this, it led to a series of terrible consequences. He became the target of public criticism and was targeted by a group of strong masters. In the end, he had no choice but to risk his life and enter the bewildering light sea and get lost. Now, looking at the man who called himself the Tiangong Elder in front of him, Chernzong had an indescribable feeling in his heart. However, this series of events had nothing to do with the Tiangong Elder. In the end, everything was driven by interest. In the final analysis, it was because he was not strong enough. It seems that you have heard of this old man's name, the Tiangong Elder said with a smile. Not only have I heard of your name, but I have also tried to find you, Chernzong said with a smile. Oh, why are you looking for this old man? The Tiangong Elder was slightly stunned. Immediately, he remembered his identity and showed a look of realization. You want to ask this old man to forge a divine weapon for you, right? Senior is wise, Chernzong said with a smile. It was the first time that the two of them had met, but once they started chatting, there was no sense of unfamiliarity. It was as if the two of them had known each other for some time. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.